On a phone call, Ryo hears that he must remain calm and pay attention, with it being explained that the call was about the death of his parents. The boy is lying in front of a truck, his consciousness fading as it is said that perhaps everything happened according to destiny. The first thing he felt was not fear of death nor relief, but only a little remorse, even though he did not know why. He also felt a bit of pity for himself because the next day would have been his 20th birthday. Then he ended up in this new world where he discovered new adventures and nothing less than that thing called magic. He crossed swords with a woman and also faced other enemies. In fact, he battled many others, to be honest. But his entire story will be told in due time, especially because the idea of reincarnation should seem like fantasy to us who are reading this story. But for him, it was real. In a completely white room, the boy appears confused when a voice asks him if his name is Ryo Mihara. He confirms as they mention that they haven't had any visitors in a while and that he died in an accident. A man continues saying that in rare cases, individuals from his Earth are reincarnated or transferred between worlds after they die, which on our planet is called Samsara, and that Ryo was the chosen one this time. As the boy remained confused, the man says that the choice is simple, that he can reincarnate in another world with all his memories intact. Surprised, the boy says that it is like reincarnating in an isekai, and the man agrees, saying that it would be a good way to explain the situation. With a thoughtful look, Ryo says that he has some questions to ask the man. The first question was whether the man was God, and he denied it, explaining that from the boy's point of view, the man would be like an angel. While digesting the information, the boy thinks that he will call the man False Michael and wonders if his thoughts can be read. The second question was about why he is reincarnating, and the angel says that they are not the ones who make the decisions. What the boy calls God made the decision and did not explain the reason to the angel. The third question was what he should do in his new world, as he was still confused. Calmly, the angel explains that he is to live as he wishes and that no instructions were given regarding how the boy should act. Happy with his answer, the boy thinks that one can live any life, that he would live a peaceful life, and therefore accepts the proposal. The angel is pleased that Ryo accepted and prepares to tell him about his new world. According to False Michael, the new world was very similar to Earth, but it had magic and gunpowder and firearms were rare. Our protagonist asks if the new world really has magic, and he is told that Earth once also had magic, but today it is no longer practiced. While the boy absorbs the information that Earth once had magic, the angel prepares to show him the new world. A globe appears before the boy while it is announced that the new world is called Phi. Smiling, the angel explains that 1 in every 5 people has an aptitude for magic, and that Ryo would have an aptitude for water magic. Disappointed, the boy asks if he can change his aptitude from water to fire or earth, but False Michael says that no changes can be made. And then he explains that magical aptitudes are bestowed by the gods, and that in the new world they are conferred at birth and will never change. Ryo then asks if he is stuck with water magic for the rest of his life. With a slight smile, the angel explains that water aptitude is actually very good, since humans cannot live without it. In addition, 80% of humans in Phi cannot use magic, so the boy was very lucky. Ryo thinks that humans need water and sodium to survive, and that in a medieval world, not having to worry about water is a great thing. Then, getting an idea, he asks the angel if water magic has healing power, and the angel says healing properties belong to light magic. Disappointed, the boy accepts it. The angel explains elemental magic to the boy and says that there are others that are not elemental, but that it would be better for him to focus on his water magic. Then he explains that the boy's physical abilities are above average and that in Phi, the system is not based on levels or skills, but on hard work. The boy asks how he can improve his physical and magical abilities. Just like on Earth, in Phi, humans can increase their physical abilities by exercising and training. Then the angel ends his speech by saying that if Ryo dedicates himself to evolving, he will evolve. Worried, the boy thinks that if he doesn't work really hard, he won't get far in this new world. The narrator says that after a few more explanations, it was time for False Michael to ask what Ryo would like to do. Cheerfully, our boy replies that he wants to live a peaceful life in some remote place. Smiling, the angel says he will reincarnate him in the Rondo forest, and he will also leave food supplies for 2 months and tells him to take advantage of the 100-meter barrier around the house, since he will need to learn to use his magic for hunting. Lastly, he says there's a beach to the southwest of the house and that Ryo will be able to extract salt from the water once he develops his water magic. Clearly having forgotten to ask the most important question, Ryo looks at the angel and asks how to use magic. False Michael says he just needs to clearly visualize the magic and train a lot, since no one is good at it from the start. Our protagonist says he'll do his best and thanks the angel for all his help. And as if in the blink of an eye, Ryo finds himself waking up in a bed. The boy begins to get up from the bed in what looks like a rudimentary cabin. As he gets up and leaves the room, he says the cabin looks like something out of the medieval period and doesn't even seem new. Upon leaving the room, he notices a rough table with 2 books on top and some chairs. Our boy ignores the books and begins to explore the rest of the cabin. In one of the rooms, he sees a bathtub and remembers that the Romans used public baths and mentally thanks for having one to himself. He then thinks that False Michael must have made it for him because he's Japanese and also realizes he still doesn't know the angel's gender. After a few minutes, he seems to remember the books on the table and goes back to check them. Upon returning, he notices that one book is a compilation about monsters and the other is about local flora. He sees a note signed by False Michael saying that the food is in the silo outside the house, which also serves as a freezer, and realizes he was indeed reading his mind. Ryo says to himself that he doesn't have any appraisal skill, a classic ISEKAID cliche, and remembers the angel warned him it would be like that. Besides that, he also has a knife. Putting the knife on his belt, he looks around and sees nothing else besides those items, and with that, he prepares to leave the cabin. As he steps outside, he is amazed by the vastness and beauty of the place with a wide open area. Looking at the mountains in the distance, he says that dragons and other types of beasts probably live there, and that it's better to stay away. Then, as he contemplates the landscape, he finally realizes that he really is in another world. Meanwhile, False Michael thinks about how nice it would be if one day he could have a physical body and live a peaceful life like Ryo is doing. Right after that, he remembers he forgot to tell him how strong his magic is even by Fae's standards. The angel thinks the boy will notice at some point, and while looking at his screen, he discovers a hidden ability and wonders how it got there. He recalls that the last time he saw this was in a girl when he first started working in reincarnation 10,000 years ago, and wonders what Ryo's ability might be. On his screen, it shows that Ryo's hidden ability is eternal youth. Ryo thinks that now that he's in his new world of magic and swords, he's eager to test out his new abilities. His water magic is the only skill he can use, and he remembers what False Michael said about visualizing the magic and practicing. Focused and thinking about water, the boy closes his eyes. Surprised, he opens his eyes and sees bubbles of water in front of his raised hands, realizing that it was his first time using magic. Remembering False Michael's lessons and watching his water bubble fall to the ground, he understands that he doesn't need to recite spells and wonders if the laws of physics are the same here. The boy also recalls what the angel said about the barrier and how he should be well prepared for battle before stepping outside its protection. Indeed, he couldn't step beyond the 100 meters of his barrier unless he was well prepared to fight. He would only have 2 months before the food in the silo ran out, and the only weapon False Michael left him was a knife. Even on Earth, it would be impossible to fight a wild boar with just a simple knife, so monsters and Fae were completely out of the question. That left Ryo with only one other weapon option. While filling his bathtub with water, he thought that the key to his magic was visualizing in his mind what he wanted. Still deep in thought, he visualizes the phenomenon called hydrogen bonding, because if he understands how what he wants to create works, he just needs to imagine it. With that, he managed to create a thin lens of water, of ice, and also to boil and unfreeze water. Suddenly, he collapses on the bathroom floor. Exhausted, he realizes that he drained all of his magic. On his 5th day in the world of Fae in the morning, he cooks a rabbit leg to eat. Visiting the silo, he notices that the only seasoning False Michael left for him was salt, along with some kind of magic that keeps the food frozen. Ryo had been perfecting his process of thawing and cooking meat excellently. He also had to devour the books left by the angel, which despite being for beginners were dense and lengthy. While eating and reading, the boy thought that he needed to find ways to heal himself, make antidotes, and create fire without needing a blade of water. The sun was setting in the world of Fae. Before sleeping, and several times during the day, he would repeat the cycle of creating and melting ice to improve his magical skills. While repeating the cycle again, he says that he can create ice in 5 seconds, but still can't make it fly. However, the water he creates always flies. During the day, Ryo collected ingredients he could find within the barrier and went on long runs to strengthen his body and his magic, preparing himself for hunting. And during the nights, he trained his magical abilities continuously, like creating ice and evaporating water. Every day he repeated this training, and with a knife fixed by ice onto a stick, we reach the 13th day of our protagonist in Fae. Looking at magical water bubbles in one hand and the spear made of an ice knife on a stick in the other, he thinks he's managed pretty well with his magic so far. He then begins to think of a good name for his new technique, and the name he comes up with is Ice Spear, even though he still can't make his ice fly. His goals for the day were to find some detoxifying herbs and a stone to use as a fire starter. With determination in his eyes, he gets excited to begin the day and accomplish his goals. Then he takes his first step outside the barrier, armed with his spear. He plans to head southwest, where False Michael said there was a beach. Ryo moves through the dark forest, climbing over small rocks and obstacles. Upon leaving the dark forest, he is surprised by the beautiful scenery before him. A lovely river stretches across his entire field of vision on a sunny day. He is amazed by the beauty of the landscape as he reaches the river and decides to descend the mountain he was on. As he descends the mountain, our protagonist notices something on the ground and decides to crouch down for a closer look. Looking more carefully, he sees that he has found quartz, one of his goals for the day. Our boy never imagined it would be so easy to find, and now he won't have any more trouble starting fires at home. He then continues his walk along the riverside. He thinks that if he keeps going northeast, he'll keep his house to the left, always knowing where it is and where to run in case of danger. As he continues walking, he reflects on the monsters of Fae and thinks he might be able to defeat some of them, but he can't be sure yet. He also remembers his second goal, which is to find detoxifying herbs, and tries to recall any tips from the book on how to find them. Suddenly, Ryo hears a sound behind him. Turning his head, he's startled to see a smaller boar. The animal charges furiously in his direction as our boy, frightened, tries to move his body. The boar closes in quickly, and in a desperate move, he throws himself to the side, trying to dodge the attack. Lying on the ground, he sees the boar ready to charge again. Still recovering and injured in the leg, he realizes the boar begins another charge at him. His hands touch the ground, and the path between him and the boar becomes a sheet of ice. The boar is caught off guard and slips, losing control of its movements. Ryo gets an idea and thinks that while he still can't make his ice spears fly, what he already knows might be enough. Sliding toward our fallen protagonist, the boar crashes into the giant ice spears. Finally, the boy collapses onto the ground, relieved as the impaled boar lies lifeless. After his life-or-death battle with the boar, Ryo changes his diet and begins to eat less and less of the food from the silo. He also learns that monsters in this world use magic, and the stronger they are, the better the magic they can wield. False Michael had warned him that the more he uses his magic, the better it will become, and the monsters have been using it since birth. But with time, he learned to subdue them all. His power grew slowly and steadily, one step at a time. Rios is cooking a huge piece of boar meat while a giant boar lies defeated behind him. The crucial difference between animals and monsters is a gem near the heart called a magic stone, which monsters possess and animals do not. The boy learns that the species of the monster determines whether it can use magic, and that the monsters of the Rondo Forest have wiped out the regular animal population. Rio still sees some animals alive here and there. Carnivorous animals like crocodiles and small, fast creatures like rabbits. In any case, carnivorous animals are still a threat to humans regardless of whether they count as a real fight compared to monsters. In this world, the monsters were so strong that they were at the top of the food chain, and adding magic to that made things much more complicated. Focused on observing the new monster, Rio remembers that the book had already taught him about the creature. The creature was called a horned bison, and it easily annihilated giant crocodiles, in addition to using wind magic to make its charges lethal. Suddenly, something unexpected for the bison falls from the sky and separates its head from the rest of its body. Rio walks slowly toward the defeated bison and says that his new water magic, guillotine, is pretty cool. Then he notices that the bison's head is being consumed by something in the water. As he gets closer, he notices the speed at which the head is being devoured. That's when he discovers there's a fish similar to a piranha from Earth that was attracted by the bison's blood in the water. Rio always tried to stick to his water magic training routine as much as he could. He started getting really good at controlling the speed of his water jets, being able to pierce through any object, except magical shields. He even created what he called a water saw, which could cut through things by spinning a disc of water at high speed. He also created ice rollers that helped with manual labor in dealing with the hides of the animals he hunted. Of course, Rio also trained his body as much as he trained his magic, because when it comes to monsters, you never know what to expect. A snake tail rushes in at high speed. A giant snake known as a kite snake appears, and he remembers that it uses wind magic to swing its tail like a sonic sword. Rio stares at the snake without showing a trace of fear. The snake effortlessly cuts through the rock beside it with its sonic tail as if it were paper. Having fled quickly, Rio balances himself as he plans his counterattack. Focusing in with water bubbles surrounding him, the boy stares intently at the snake. The next moment, a light rain begins to fall over both Rio and the snake. Our protagonist raises his hand and focuses on every droplet of water around the snake. The snake, with murderous intent, flies toward the boy in a brutal and ferocious attack. Finishing his concentration, he makes a sudden motion with his hands and body. Then, gigantic ice spears pierce through the snake's body, defeating it instantly. The giant snake's venom was dissolved by the rain and likely couldn't withstand the boiling water. However, there were monsters that Rio's cheap tricks didn't work on, like the assassin eagle, which used wind magic and supersonic speed to attack its targets. Our boy kept running at high speed while being chased by the assassin eagle. The eagle then crashes into the ground with a tremendous impact, throwing our boy to the side. Our protagonist, regaining his balance, prepares a close-range attack on the assassin eagle with his spear. Rio was sure he had hit the eagle, but it flew backward, dodging his strike. Rio had struck near its eye and thinks that if he had landed a direct hit to the eye, he would have defeated the beast, by far the strongest monster he had faced so far. Focused on defending himself, he thinks he managed to save himself by counterattacking, but he never knew when another monster might appear in the middle of a fight. The monster book that False Michael had left for him contained an incredible collection of monsters and detailed descriptions about them. Since it was a beginner's edition, he assumed there was an intermediate and an advanced one, and at the end of the book, there were two special pages. One page displayed an illustration of a dragon, and the other showed an illustration of an akuma, a type of humanoid monster. The special pages were made for those who aimed to be the best of the best, but that was never Rio's goal. He simply didn't care about that kind of goal after all. He just wanted to live a peaceful life. And so, living that peaceful life, Rio completed his first full year in the new world. Then we find our protagonist on a moonlit night, facing what seems to be another humanoid being. 1 year had passed since Rio's arrival in the new world of Phi. Over the lake in the northernmost part of the Rondo Forest, the moon approached its peak in the sky. Then a Dullahan, a headless warrior, appeared before him. Our protagonist wonders what Headless Knight is doing in the Rondo Forest and where he came from. The true strength of the Headless Knight lay in his swordsmanship, and he wasn't even listed in the beginner's monster book, which could only mean that either he wasn't considered a monster or his level was above beginner. If the Dullahan wasn't going to use magic, Rio wouldn't either, but the knight was incredibly skilled with the sword, and on top of that he was arrogant, as if saying he would train Rio whether he wanted it or not. Rio, thrown to the ground and injured, thinks that at least that's what it felt like. After landing 3 attacks that would have been fatal to anyone else, the knight turns his back on our boy. Then he mounts his horse and rides away, as if saying he expects Rio to be better next time. Our boy didn't even know if his attacks had any effect on the knight, since he wasn't able to land a clean hit. His fighting spirit grew every day, and the first time he had lost almost instantly, but this time the battle had already lasted an hour. Rio was moving faster and could now anticipate the knight's movements during the fight. However, when he clashed his ice sword against the knight's blade, his sword was completely shattered. Then he found himself staring at the Headless Knight with a surprised look in his eyes. The knight then launched an attack that sent Rio flying, hurling him several meters away. Our protagonist, lying on the ground and injured, thinks at least he managed to land 3 hits today. As Rio stands up, the knight remains still in front of him as if waiting for something. Then he draws his sword and places his hand over the blade, making it glow intensely. The sword then transforms, increasing in size and completely changing the shape of the blade. The knight then hands the blade to our protagonist, mounts his horse, and rides off again, leaving him with his new sword. Our boy, kneeling with the new sword in hand, thinks it was a gift led from a master to a disciple. Then he thinks that with his new weapon, he has to train even harder. After his battle with the assassin eagle, he knew what he had to do, become stronger and stronger. So every morning he did 30 minutes of physical exercise to strengthen his muscles. He also ran while using his magic to the limit and trained sword fighting with the Headless Knight. In sword training, the right hand determines the blade's path and the left hand is used for support. With every strike during training, his strength and speed improved. In the second encounter with the assassin eagle, it didn't come alone, it brought its partner. In the first fight, the eagle lost an eye from engaging at close range. This time, it would make the same mistake. During the battle, our boy grew tired from running and dodging the attacks of both eagles, but he had already anticipated this. Using his magic in different ways, he managed to avoid the second eagle's surprise attack. The one-eyed assassin eagle didn't expect its companion to be killed so quickly, so it retreated and fled. Rio thinks the eagle was the first opponent that brought him close to death, not just once, but twice. Rio had already prepared himself for death on other occasions, but with the one-eyed eagle, he felt something different. In any case, this marked the third and final time they would meet. The eagle appeared before him completely different from their last 2 encounters. Looking at it, our boy saw it was much darker and larger than before, with a black aura surrounding it. The eagle made its first move by hurling its body at Rio, who barely had time to dodge. Fallen to the ground, he remembered it had used the same maneuver in their first battle. After taking the eagle's hit, he was certain it was the same beast, but now it had evolved. The fight continued fiercely as our boy struggled to defend himself, realizing how much stronger the eagle had become. During the battle, the eagle shattered Rio's ice armor into pieces while he tried to repair it. Suddenly, he found himself unable to use his magic, and the eagle launched another charge at him. He barely managed to dodge the attack, and on top of that, he was growing exhausted. He then thinks that maybe the eagle is somehow disabling his magic. The eagle screeches and then casts a lightning spell across a massive area in front of Rio. Dodging the eagle's lightning attack, he ends up losing his spear. The eagle, seeing an opening, prepares to launch a new assault on our boy. Rio then draws his new sword and thinks he might be able to channel magic through it. In their final fierce exchanges, their eyes meet once again. Rio quickly and effectively pierces the eagle's throat as it loses strength. Looking into the eagle's good eye, Rio says he understands it, how it lost its partner and its eye, and still gave everything it had and was defeated. He continues to saying their encounter at least helped him grow and become stronger, and he thanks her for that. He then says she was truly brave for showing how much she had evolved, and that he would be honored to deliver the final blow. And so, pulling his sword from the monster's throat, its fate was sealed. The next day, Rio visited the battlefield where he had fought the one-eyed assassin eagle. Seeing the remnants of the battle, he finally felt that the victory was real, though he felt no pride in it. While our boy stood there, something descended before him, and he couldn't think of anything else. It was then that a massive dragon landed in front of him. The dragon stood still before our hero and communicated telepathically, wondering if this is how telepathic contact is made with humans. Then it continued, saying it had been a long time since it made contact with a human and asked if a human could hear it. Still frightened, Rio begins to hear the dragon's voice in his mind. The dragon then seems pleased that he can hear it and says that it is the dragon standing before him. Our boy wonders if this is telepathy and apologizes to the dragon, saying he was in shock but can hear it now. Then the beast asks if he has seen a bird that evolved from an assassin eagle in the area. He thought he knew that bird all too well. Immediately, our protagonist apologizes in case the bird was one of the dragon's acolytes, and the beast then asks if it was he who killed her. The dragon says she was not his acolyte and that he was merely curious because the bird's aura had vanished from the region. He continues, saying it would made sense if one of the other dragons had eaten the bird, so he descended the mountain to check. Still with a bit of fear in his eyes, our protagonist answers that yes, he was the one who killed the one-eyed assassin eagle. The beast is surprised and says it's fine because he's satisfied with the bird's disappearance. Then he explains that this bird was the first in centuries to evolve in the forest and asks if she had been suppressing the boy's magic. Rio promptly responds that yes, she had. He says he could barely believe he wasn't able to use his magic and felt like his rights as a mage had been violated. The dragon seems to notice something in Rio and says it looks like he's carrying something strange with him. Then he recognizes the sword as the sword of the fairy king, but Rio says he received it from a headless knight at the northern lake. The beast confirms that, saying the knight is the water fairy king who resides in that forest, while Rio states he is a water mage and that the sword saved him the day before. The dragon then says that's why the king liked him, and it means he's receiving magic lessons from the king. Our boy quickly replies that no, he's not taking magic lessons from the water fairy king. Then he says he's training sword fighting with the king and has never seen him use magic. The dragon finds it very strange that he's learning swordsmanship instead of water magic from the king, but says that if the king is doing that, it must mean the boy needs it. He then says that the water fairy king probably likes the boy since, like him, he has lived for thousands and thousands of years. Rio sees an opportunity and asks the dragon if it's okay for him to ask a few questions, to which the dragon immediately says yes. Then the boy begins by explaining that he'd like to know more about the Rondo Forest, things like its size or what kind of place it is. He explains that the true size of the Rondo Forest is that of a small continent, as it used to be called the Rondo subcontinent. The dragon also explains that the small continent is surrounded by water except to the north, where a mountain range encircles it. Next, the dragon says that as far as he knows, Rio is the only human in the Rondo subcontinent. Rio is shocked. He knew he asked for a peaceful, isolated life, but not this isolated. The beast, also surprised, says it can't be possible he's lived his whole life like that and asks where the boy is from. Then without hesitation, Rio says he was reincarnated, coming from another world, and that he knows others have come here just like him. And suddenly, a loud roar echoes, shaking the air and startling both the dragon and the boy. The dragon then closes his eyes and continues listening to the roar while Rio, frozen like a statue, stands still. Then the dragon begins to leave, saying that he's being summoned, but that they will surely meet again. Desperate, Rio asks for the dragon's name while telling him his own. He says his name is Lewin and warns the boy not to go to the eastern mountains as dragons there may attack freely. Then the dragon takes off at a terrifying speed, easily breaking the sound barrier. Our hero watches in awe as the dragon continues flying away at supersonic speed. Then our boy, now overwhelmed, says that dragons really are incredibly powerful as the dust settles around him. Sometime later, Lewin finally arrives at the location where he was being summoned. He thinks Rio seemed peculiar and wonders if he's really human, or perhaps an evolution or mutation of the species. Remembering the boy's story, the dragon comments that he has never seen anything like it, but the story seemed fascinating. And he thinks that even after such a long life, there are still things he doesn't know, and that he'll enjoy continuing to observe the boy. Rio then, watching himself through a water mirror, notices that he hasn't aged a single day. From time to time, the boy's hair grows quite a bit. Then he cuts it, just like he does with his nails, which also grow now and then. While bathing, he notices that neither his height nor his face changes and thinks that today he'll go look for fish and salt. Then he drowns his thoughts in the warm bathtub as he takes his morning bath. Upon reaching the beach, Rio notices many pieces of wood scattered across the sand. And then he seems to notice something in the sand and runs toward it. As he gets closer, he thinks there may have been a shipwreck, and he can only see 3 people on the sand. Checking the first man's condition, he confirms that he has been dead for quite some time. In the distance, he notices that the other man has a piece of wood pierced through his body and realizes there's nothing he can do for him now either. Then he spots a third man wearing armor lying on the nearby sand. Walking over to him, Rio notices the man's right arm is in pieces and bleeding heavily. Examining the wound more closely, he wonders if an artery was hit since the amount of blood was enormous. Rio thinks that if he leaves him there, the man will bleed to death and that he must at least try to help. So looking directly at the wound, Rio begins to concentrate and thinks of a way to use his water magic. Revisiting his memories, he recalls that the human body is made up of 60% water, and as a water mage, he should be able to manipulate blood. Then focusing 100%, he finds the source of the hemorrhage and tries to close it. With great effort, he manages to gather water around the man's wound and stop the bleeding. The man's injuries still seem to gush a lot of blood at first. As the bleeding begins to stop, Rio finally feels proud that he was somehow able to help the man. Then he lifts the armored man from the hot sand and carries him in his arms. Soon after, he finds a cart among the wreckage and places the man inside, making it easier to transport him. Sometime later, the man wakes up startled in a place he doesn't recognize. As he stands up, he notices he's in a house, and a very large one at that, and wonders if it might be the mayor's house of some village. Then he notices something to his right that catches his attention. He sees that his sword and armor are propped up against the wall beside him. The man then leaves the house and sees Ryo holding firewood and immediately introduces himself as Abel, asking if Ryo was the one who saved him. Right afterward, he thanks the boy for saving his life. Our hero says it was nothing, and then he only carried Abel back to his house after finding him on the beach. He then says that he was only able to save one man out of the 3 who were on the sand, and Abel says that it's okay because they were smugglers. Ryo then stops what he's doing and turns to Abel, asking if they really were smugglers. Our hero then thinks that Abel must also be a smuggler since they were together, but at the same time he doubts it because the man doesn't seem like a bad person. Still, with a thoughtful look, our boy realizes they're talking without any issues. So he continues thinking that Abel probably isn't speaking Japanese and that False Michael did a good job helping them understand each other. Then with a smile on his face, Ryo introduces himself to Abel and asks if he wants to eat, since he must be starving. Still in shock, Abel hears our hero say he hung up his clothes and that they should be dry by now. Back at the beach with Abel, Ryo shows him where the other 2 men were who had been with him. Speculating on where the bodies ended up, our hero tells Abel how lucky he was, while Abel asks the boy not to speak so formally. Our boy tells Abel that it's normal for him to speak formally with older people, while the man says he prefers a more casual tone, like between friends. In a brief moment of silence, our boy thinks that maybe he's made his first friend in Phi, and Abel wonders whether the ship's cargo sank or just disappeared. The man continues thinking that maybe everything from the ship is inside the Kraken's stomach and that there's nothing he can do about it now. He thanks our hero, but says that what he's looking for is no longer anywhere on the shore. He then says he needs to get to Louvre to send a message to his friends. Ryo then says he doesn't know the city but assumes it must be to the north, and that Abel will have to travel a long distance to get there. Then our hero explains that there are no cities or people nearby, while the man says he'll have to make the journey either way. The man then turns to Ryo and asks if he'd like to go with him. A few seconds pass without our hero responding, so the man starts waving his hand in front of Ryo's eyes to get his attention. Later, in our boy's cabin, the man apologizes for being so abrupt and explains that it would be like a job, or that Ryo would be like a guide. He continues, saying he'd even pay Ryo and help him out if he wanted to try life in the city. The man, sweating, then asks our boy what he thinks. Our hero accepts the proposal, but says he can only go the next morning as he still has things to take care of. Abel, happy, thanks our boy for going with him. After washing the dinner dishes, Ryo informs the man that he's going out and will be back soon. When asked where he's going so late, he replies while stepping out of the cabin. He also explains that he needs to let someone know he'll be away and asks Abel to wait, as it might take a while. As the man responds, we then see the Headless Knight and his corpse waiting for our hero. Standing before him, our boy says he will leave the forest tomorrow and that tonight's training will be the last until he returns from his adventure. The knight waits patiently as Ryo lifts the sword he received from him and points it at the warrior. Our hero then prepares himself and tells the knight he doesn't want the training to be like the others. He wants him to come at him with everything he's got. Meanwhile, by candlelight, Abel wonders who Ryo said he was going to inform, since no one else lies in the area. He thinks Ryo is alone now, but maybe he was with someone and went to visit their grave, though that wasn't something he planned to pry into. Even though Ryo doesn't know where the city of Lune is, he said it's far to the north and wonders why he said that. He also reflects that it would be very hard to go alone, considering he doesn't even know how big the forest is. Wrapping up his thoughts, he says that Ryo is a mage without his staff and is probably bad at fighting, and that he'll help him when they reach the city with clothes and so on. Our hero is tired and sweaty, his sword buried in the ground, panting from the training with the Headless Knight. Then he notices something, a movement from the knight in front of him. The warrior then extends something to Ryo, who wonders what it is. The noble Headless Knight stands proudly before our hero, without answering his question. Afterward, Abel says he doesn't want to seem rude to our boy and that he doesn't have to answer if he doesn't want to. He then asks where Ryo went last night, and Ryo explains that he went to inform his master that he would be away on an adventure as he puts on his new hooded cloak. Explaining to Abel that it was like a farewell gift, the man asks if it has any special effects, and our boy says he doesn't know. Then the two begin walking toward the flowers and finally decide to start their journey. Looking back at his cabin, our hero silently bids farewell to that place, a nostalgic look in his eyes. During the morning, they wandered the land and headed north without encountering any monsters, but by mid-afternoon, something happened. A small boar appeared in their path, and Abel quickly drew his sword and charged at the creature. With a precise strike, the warrior impaled the small boar and ended the fight in seconds. Surprised, our hero looked at the other with wide eyes. Seeing the doubt in the warrior's eyes, Ryo explains that parts of Abel's body glow when he uses a combat skill, and that the way he moves changes during it. The warrior then explains that it's normal, that those are combat skills restricted to warriors who use weapons. In any case, he says they should focus on finding a good place to camp as night is approaching. He also mentions they pass a large tree with a hole in the middle, and that it should serve well for camping. They could also eat the boar. Already inside the tree with the camp set up, Abel says he'll rest first, but tells our hero not to hesitate and to wake him if anything happens. Then the warrior lies down and starts to rest, while Rio sits at the camp, deep in thought. He then thinks that since he has time, he'll practice controlling his magic. And so our hero's watch went on, the night growing deeper and calmer with each passing hour. A few hours later, Abel wakes up and tells our hero to rest while he takes over the watch. The man then observes the rabbit our hero had hunted. Examining the catch, he questions Rio's methods, but finds them very valid and effective. Looking at Rio lying down, he's sure that the cloak wasn't made by humans and wonders what kind of mentor he has. Abel thought the boy's master was a spirit, but spirits don't give gifts like cloaks, so it must be some kind of legendary creature, like a dragon. He is certain the cloak wasn't made by humans, which means the boy's master could still be a spirit. As he shivers in the cold, Abel thinks it can't be them again. Seconds later, our hero wakes up and greets the warrior with a good morning. Then our heroes continue their journey toward their goal. Abel walks forward with his sword drawn, while Rio follows behind, observing the vegetation. Suddenly, something falls from the sky to the right of the warrior, startling them both. Abel draws his sword and thinks it might be something invisible or an enemy using invisibility. Looking up, they realize it's a killer eagle. Our hero warns the warrior that the beast uses air magic to attack from a distance. The warrior suggests they retreat, but Rio informs him they have a boar pursuing them and unknown beasts ahead. Unfortunately, escape isn't an option. They wonder if they might have fallen into some kind of trap, but our hero confirms it's just a coincidence. The open field seems to be used by the killer eagle to hunt, and they wonder what they should do now. Rio says it's best they fight in the clearing, and he'll take care of the killer eagle while the other handles the boar. Abel, worried, warns the boy that the eagle's aerial assault and charge can kill even a warrior like him if he's not careful. Our hero says defense is his specialty as an ice mage and assumes warriors have a hard time dealing with flying targets. The warrior says that's fine, steps forward, and prepares for combat. Still running, the warrior tells Rio he'll return as soon as he deals with the boar and tells him not to dare die. Our hero tells Abel to keep a cool head or he'll end up getting hurt. Then the warrior runs toward the boar, wondering how Rio detected the monster from so far away. The boar then controls the surrounding rocks to launch a magical stone attack, raining a barrage down on our warrior. Our warrior uses a combat skill and gracefully dodges every rock thrown at him. He then brings his sword down toward the boar as soon as he gets close. He pulls his sword from the body of the defeated boar. Then he drops to his knees, planting his sword in the ground and gasping for breath. Meanwhile, he thinks he used too many abilities too quickly during the fight, and the fatigue has finally caught up to him. But he needs to recover quickly because Rio needs his help. He then picks up the body of the defeated boar and carries it back to where our hero is waiting with the killer eagle. Returning to the spot where he left our hero, he sees the scene of the killer eagle lying on the ground, with our hero smiling beside the defeated monster. Completely in disbelief, the warrior looks at Rio and asks if he really defeated the beast. Our hero, smiling, says yes, he did, and mentions the monsters ahead also retreated. Abel then drops to his knees, stunned, as the boy asks if he's hurt. Looking at the scene of Rio's battle, he says he's not hurt and that he's fine. Then he says he's just a little tired. Abel immediately asks how Rio managed to dodge the killer eagle's attacks. He continues saying that invisible air magic attacks are extremely hard to dodge using just sight. Meanwhile, Rio asks him to turn around and face him. With curiosity, Abel turns to face our hero. Then the warrior notices and touches a thin wall of ice. Rio explains the barrier is hard to notice, and the warrior confirms it's practically invisible. Abel then realizes that the killer eagle practically defeated itself while charging into an almost invisible wall of ice. The warrior says he knows many air, fire, and earth mages, but an old man once told him water mages don't really fight, and he will be proven wrong. Smiling, our protagonist asks Abel what that was. Abel promptly replies that it's nothing, he was just talking to himself. Then both look up toward the mountain and hear frightening sounds. They decide they'll have to go either left or right to find a way out of the mountain range. The warrior says he has a bad feeling about both directions. And it's at that moment that Abel pulls out a coin and suggests they leave the decision to chance. Heads, they go left. Tails, they go right. Before our hero can even think, warrior has already flipped the coin into the air. The coin lands on the warrior's hand with heads facing up, so they decide to take the path to the left. Then Abel seems to notice something strange about Rio's behavior. He asks if there's something wrong with the coin, and the boy says he's never seen money before. He then asks if he can take a closer look, and the warrior promptly says yes. Abel proceeds to explain how the coin economy works in this world, and Rio compares it to 19th century Earth while asking how many nations exist in this world. Drawing from memory, Abel says there are 3 major realms: the Kingdom of Nightly, the Empire of Debui, and the Federation of Handaliu. While speaking, the warrior once again senses something strange around them. He then says they seem to be in a stone golem nest, while Rio comments that he didn't even know golems had nests. The warrior explains that a nest is just what they call a place where a large number of golems appear, and Rio wonders if golems shouldn't have human-like limbs. After stopping to count, the warrior says there are 12 of them, and that running isn't really a good option. At that moment, our boy asks Abel if it's okay for him to test a new magic, a new attack, and the warrior agrees. Our hero then stretches out his hand and focuses on his new spell. Suddenly, 10 thick walls of ice fall upon all the golems in the area, making a sound like an earthquake. With a silly grin, our hero jokes that this is what you call a weapon of mass destruction. They then clear the area and notice a large dark yellow magic stone. It's explained that the value of these stones is determined by their size and color. Rio says it's nice to have battle spoils and tells Abel he can keep the magic stone. Slightly incredulous, the warrior says fine and that he'll hold on to that prize. Meanwhile, Rio realizes that the method he used to defeat the monsters didn't work as intended. The warrior says that if it weren't for Rio, they might be dead, and it's not like he even knew about harvesting magic stones, to which Rio agrees. Some time passes, and our hero notices something to his right and asks Abel what it is. As Rio points out that it looks like a giant hippopotamus, the warrior says it's called a behemoth, and our hero jokingly asks if he wants to hunt it. Our boy does the math and thinks the behemoth is far too large even for his 10 ice walls, and Abel confirms that and tells him not to even try anything against that thing. Rio then turns serious and asks the warrior if he thinks he's crazy, and the warrior immediately says yes. Then our hero seems to notice something in the distance. He sees something flying toward them in the distance and thinks it might be dragons. As they get closer, our heroes can see they're wyverns, not dragons. They both quickly realize the wyverns aren't heading toward them. They're heading for the behemoth. Rio gets excited, saying he'll finally get to witness a beast battle. He points out that the behemoth is clearly outnumbered since 6 wyverns are about to attack it. Then one of the flying beasts screeches and unleashes a sharp gust of wind toward the behemoth. Our heroes are shocked by the winged monster's attack and wonder what the behemoth will do. Then, completely still, the behemoth uses stone magic to summon massive boulders around itself like a shield. We then see the wyverns attack, heading toward one of the rocks the creatures summon as a barrier. The wind attacks from the flying monsters crash into the stones summoned by the behemoth, protecting it completely from damage. The wyverns quickly launch another wave of wind attacks at the creature. The behemoth then summons enormous stone walls around itself for protection. Surprised, both our heroes and the wyverns stare stunned at the towering walls that formed around the giant beast. Abel says he knew of behemoths but didn't know they could use magic, while our hero was expecting a battle, but not a magical one. The winged monsters hover patiently, circling the stone walls the land beast summoned around itself. And with a terrible roar, the behemoth breaks down its stone walls and stares directly at the wyverns. Suddenly, the flying monsters and our heroes notice that something strange has happened. The wyverns suddenly lose their ability to fly and fall to the ground around the behemoth. Abel asks Rio if the monster somehow paralyzed the wyverns from all directions, while our hero says he highly doubts it. Once again, the behemoth lets out a guttural roar, frightening everyone and making the ground shake. As the wyverns thrash on the ground, Rio thinks he's seen this happen before. Then the boy says it's probably magic nullification. Shocked, Abel asks if that's even possible, as he's never seen a human capable of doing that, let alone a monster, and Rio tells him to look more closely. Our boy points out that the winged monsters are trying to get up but can't, and if they were paralyzed, they wouldn't be able to move at all. Abel can't believe what his eyes are seeing, but then he pauses and says he's heard of traps like this in dungeons, and Rio gets very excited when he hears the word dungeons. He then asks if the dungeons in the Kingdom of Nightly have anti-magic rooms, and the warrior says no. The dungeons are in the Western Province, not in the kingdom. As the behemoth tramples over the wyverns on the ground, the warrior asks our hero if he's interested in dungeons, and he promptly answers yes. While the beast finishes off the wyverns, Abel says Rio is lucky because Loon has the only dungeon in the Central Provinces. Our boy says the warrior should have told him that earlier, but the warrior defends himself, saying he didn't know Rio liked dungeons that much. Then they continue walking away while talking about how terrifying that battle was, wondering what a fight between Abel and the behemoth would be like. Next, they watch as a wyvern eats a boar and prepare their trap. Rio raises his arms and focuses on his magic. Suddenly, massive ice spikes fall from the sky. All of them strike the monster, pinning it to the ground while the warrior quickly moves to the creature's head. After that, while talking, the boy suggests it might be good to hunt some animals since their food supply is starting to run low. Then a small ice arrow hits a rabbit, pinning it to the mountainside. They also start ambushing other wyverns that are scattered around the area. After defeating another beast, Rio thinks it's starting to get easy to hunt them, while Abel admits he's still surprised at how easy it's been. Meanwhile, our hero slices the meat and says he just needs to finish drying it so they can continue their journey. Then the boy comments that maybe they can get through by that path, while Abel, concerned, tells him not to let his guard down. Just as Abel finishes speaking, both look to their left and spot a giant beast resembling a griffin staring at them. They both notice the creature is fixated on the rabbit meat Rio is tied to his waist, so he takes one and throws it to the beast. The creature happily eats it while Rio says it looks like it's starving. The griffin stays cheerful and bouncy, and our hero tells Abel to feed it too. The warrior then takes a rabbit from his belt and also tosses it to the beast, which flies off after grabbing the food. Then our hero notices a road behind the beast and points it out to Abel. The warrior sees a signpost and tells Rio it's definitely a path, and Rio calls him over to follow the trail. The Yule Mountains are a mountain range to the south of the central provinces, known for being impossible to cross, not even by adventurers. Long ago, the path had a different name, but no one remembers it anymore. Nowadays, it's called the Evil Mountains because it's infested with orcs and ogres. Then we see Abel breathing a sigh of relief that they're still alive after surviving the Evil Mountains on their way to civilization. Rio then asks if the warrior is a rank B adventurer. He confirms it, asking why the question. Our hero explains he's unsure about the benefits of registering with an adventurer's guild, and Abel explains that he doesn't have to pay tolls or city taxes. He also explains that the guild card serves as an ID, allowing free entry into any city and gives access to better market prices. Rio says that's exactly what he needed to hear, and Abel adds that the guild also stores adventurers' belongings and profits. He finishes by explaining it would be far too dangerous for adventurers to wander around carrying all their wealth in their pockets. Amazed, Rio thinks that guilds are basically like banks. He then finds himself in the middle of a city with tall buildings around him, looking at a pamphlet while holding a pouch. Our hero remembers the questions he asked Abel along the way, such as whether he could withdraw money from other guild branches at any time. Abel explains that his knowledge is limited to the central provinces, but that the guild operates as an independent organization present in every nation. He then adds that when nations go to war, they can hire the guild and adventurers to fight as mercenaries. While Rio thinks that would be cheaper than sending knights into battle, the warrior says that this type of commission can be accepted or declined by adventurers. Abel goes on to say he fears the possibility of an enemy taking everything he owns, and that he'd have no choice but to fight. Rio then reacts angrily, asking how they allow their money to be used as a hostage and how the governments permit such a thing. He then points and says he can see a city in the distance. Abel says he's almost certain it's the city of Kaladi, which means they've reached the kingdom of Nightly. The warrior explains that Kaladi is the southeasternmost city of the kingdom, and that if they walk northeast for a day, they'll reach Loon, Abel's final destination. He also suggests that if Rio wants to register as an adventurer, he should do it in Loon and not in Kaladi, prompting our hero to ask why. The warrior explains that Loon is the largest border city in the kingdom and attracts all kinds of people, mainly because it's the only one in the region with a dungeon. Abel says that if Rio makes Loon his home base, he'll feel more settled since cities tend to treat local adventurers with more privileges. Rio replies that it makes sense, but he still doesn't have a card to show when they arrive in Kaladi. Abel explains that it's not a problem since he's a B-rank adventurer and can sponsor Rio, and that the fee is just 1 silver coin. Our boy continues by saying that the warrior should know he's always had a lot of respect for him, while the warrior, visibly moved, looks at Rio. Still a bit awkward, he says it's fine and that they'll spend one night in Kaladi and Rio needs to try a local dish. Next, Rio is at a restaurant trying what looks like curry with rice, amazed by the flavor. One after the other, he orders more curry and more dishes, stuffing himself throughout the night. While walking through the city, Rio asks Abel if there's curry in Loon too, and the warrior assures him it's very common in the southern region of the kingdom. Our hero then promises himself that he'll try to recreate the curry when he returns home to the forest of Rondo. The next day, walking through the city, our boy asks Abel if there are residents who live outside the city too. Abel explains that yes, usually farmers live outside the village, but in the past, they lived within the city. He continues explaining that's why Loon doesn't close its gates at night, while Rio questions the safety, since Loon seems to have far more patrols than Kaladi. Abel says that because of its history and size, he believes Loon does a good job of keeping the peace. Upon arriving at the gates of Loon, the guard greets Abel by name and says his companion must pay the fee, and Abel says he'll handle it. He then rummages through his pouch, searching for the right amount to give the guard. Abel says they should go straight to the guild and asks if Rio really wants to register, and our hero confirms, saying he wants to try the adventurer's life. The warrior says that since he's with him, Rio can apply for a rank up. He explains that adventurers usually start at rank F but can jump to E or D if accompanied by someone of rank B or higher. Our hero then asks what the advantages of being rank D are, and Abel explains that he would earn more money by taking on better missions and rewards. Rio then asks the warrior if wyvern magic stones are valuable, and he replies that they're extremely valuable because those beasts are hard to defeat. He continues saying they're practically priceless since they're rarely seen for sale in the market, and that if Rio sold all the ones he has, it might crash the market. Then, in front of the Adventurers Guild, the warrior says the guild knows how to handle that, so he doesn't need to worry. As soon as they enter the guild, a young woman asks if Abel is real, while a man says he's surprised to see Abel in the flesh. A large warrior behind the girl is shocked to see Abel alive, and the narrator tells us that B-rank adventurers are rare, and that Abel is the leader of the Crimson Sword group. The group formed by Abel include the following members: Rhea, the priestess, Warren, the shield bearer, and Lynn, the mage. Then our hero pauses to think that being friends with Abel could be very advantageous, considering how well-liked he is by everyone around him. Abel then places his hands on Rio's shoulders and introduces him to everyone as the savior of his life, the one who made it possible for him to arrive there alive. Next, he says Rio is going to register as an adventurer and after that will be one of them. He asks everyone to be kind to the new member. Everyone then gives wide smiles to our hero. Rio introduces himself and says he's happy to meet everyone present. One man thanks our hero for saving Abel's life, and another says he hopes to get to know him better as well. Abel then asks Nina if she can handle Rio's paperwork, as he intends to recommend him for D-rank adventurer. The girl says she can take care of everything, but he'll need something to prove that he's worthy of being considered a D-rank adventurer. Abel had already expected that and asks if it's possible to meet the guild master now, and Nina responds that she believes it is. While they walk there, the girl says the master has been in his office all day handling paperwork and is in a bad mood. She says she'll let the guild master know they're there and asks them to wait in the lounge in the meantime. Abel then sits comfortably on a sofa while Rio stands waiting to be called. Suddenly, they hear a loud voice shouting, asking what they were saying. At the same time, our heroes hear heavy footsteps approaching. A man then enters the lounge and kneels when he sees Abel, clearly overwhelmed with relief. Abel apologizes for worrying the guild master but says he's alive, while the master says he lost his will to live when he heard Abel had gone missing. Regaining his composure, the master asks where the mage is and Abel points to Rio, saying that he saved his life. The man introduces himself as Humaglass, the guild master of Loon, and thanks Rio for saving Abel's life. Rio responds that it's no problem, that he just happened to cross paths with the warrior by chance. Then the warrior tells the guild master that our hero wants to register in the Loon Guild and that he wants to recommend him for a rank increase. The master says they'll need proof if he really intends to recommend him. Nina then says that's exactly what Abel came to discuss with the guild master. Shortly after, Nina excuses herself, saying that if they need her, she'll be at the front desk. As she closes the door, the guild master heads toward an armchair in the lounge. Finally sitting down in his chair, he says he needs to know a few things first. Abel steps forward and says Rio is stronger than him, while our hero asks if he ate something bad to be saying such a thing. The guild master is clearly impressed by Abel's statement. The warrior continues, saying our hero is a clown but doesn't mess around when it comes to work, and he displays the spoils from the monsters they defeated on their way there. Spreading the magic stones out on the table, Abel shows their size and color to everyone. The guild master is surprised and says they are air attribute magic stones due to their green color, but leaves something unsaid. He then adds that not only are they huge but also dark in color, and asks if they got them from wyverns. Abel confirms and says that Rio has just as many as he does. Still in disbelief, the guild master asks where they found so many wyverns. If they were near the city, they have to recruit every living soul to stop an attack like that. The warrior reassures him, saying they hunted them south of the Evil Mountains, and the master asks how they ended up there in the first place. The warrior then explains that their ship was destroyed and he ended up on a large piece of land from which they headed toward the mountains and found a wyvern nest. The guild master then asks if Abel intends to use his network of contacts to sell the stones without destabilizing the market, and Abel sheepishly says yes. Then Hugh says he can sell to a wide range of buyers, including members of the royal family, and that he can get them the money within 2 or 3 days. He then asks if they should split the profits 50-50, but Abel says no, that he only wants 40% and 60% should go to Rio. Rio disagrees and says it should be 50-50, but the warrior insists that he needs to repay our hero for saving his life and getting him back safely. Our boy was about to protest again when the guild master told him not to even think about tarnishing Abel's honor by refusing the proposed split. So finally, our boy gives in and accepts the terms, 60% for him and 40% for Abel. Meanwhile, at the reception desk, Nina is speaking to someone who doesn't seem to be listening as she asks them to wait. Then we see the hallway and the receptionist shouting for someone to stop because things aren't settled yet. We then see Rio, noticing something strange just outside the hall's door. A girl opens the door and is shocked. Her legs give out and she starts crying when she sees that Abel is alive. Smiling, the warrior then apologizes to Lynn for making her worry. Right after, a priestess and a tall warrior enter the room and Abel greets them, saying he's back. The priestess, her eyes filled with emotion, welcomes him back. The guildmaster, standing up, says they have a lot to discuss and that Nina and Rio will find the paperwork in his office. In whose office, he tells our hero to sit and asks Nina for the relevant papers to register Rio as a D-rank adventurer. Rio, a bit shy, asks the master if it's really okay for him to be ranked D, and the man reassures him that it is. He then asks our hero, who wouldn't be convinced by the number of magic stones they brought back. Rio, still embarrassed, as the final blows were all dealt by Abel, not him. Hugh says he knows the warrior is skilled, but he also knows that no matter how talented, a warrior alone would never take down a wyvern by himself, which means our hero was strong enough to create the opportunity for Abel to finish off the beasts. In any case, our hero is certainly good enough to register as a D-rank adventurer. The guildmaster gives Rio a light, friendly punch and is quite surprised. He then says Rio is pretty athletic for a mage. Our hero explains that he used to hunt alone and had to train his body in case he ran out of magic in the middle of a fight or needed to run. The guildmaster says he completely understands what he means and wishes more young people today thought like that too. Right after, someone knocks on the guildmaster's office door and he tells them to come in. Nina enters the office with what looks like a crystal ball and says she brought the registration tool. Hugh thanks her and says he'll leave the paperwork to her. Telling our hero to follow whatever instructions Nina gives, everything will go smoothly. Nina takes the opportunity to formally introduce herself to Rio, saying she works at the Adventurers Guild of Loon. Our hero says it's a pleasure to meet her as well and thanks her for the hospitality. Sitting across from him, Nina says she needs to establish some basic facts first and asks him to answer a few questions. She asks for his name, occupation, and the attribute of his occupation, all of which Rio answers correctly, except the last one, when she asks about his residence. Embarrassed, our hero says he doesn't have a residence yet because he just arrived in the city. She then explains that he can stay in the guild's dormitory for up to 300 days after registering, which should give him plenty of time to settle in. She also says the Dorns help new adventurers get to know each other and he's free to leave anytime within those 300 days if he wants. As he picks up the paper handed to him, Rio thinks Phi is still full of mysteries as there are no printers yet, but the quality and quantity of copies is incredible. Nina then asks if our hero has ever entered a dungeon, and he replies that he hasn't yet. She says the guild offers a monthly seminar about dungeons, and in addition, there are various free courses and seminars for beginner adventurers as well. She then recommends the dungeon seminar, and Rio, very excited, says yes, he wants to attend the seminar. Smiling our hero's enthusiasm, Nina says the dungeon seminar will take place the day after tomorrow. She says the dungeon seminar lasts 5 days with a different topic each day, and she recommends that he attend all of them. Finally, she says she will fill out the form for him and tells him to be on the 3rd floor of the guild hall at 9 in the morning the day after tomorrow. Rio then wonders if in Phi they measure time the same way as on Earth. Next, Nina tells him that he can check the time on the tower in the plaza and explains that the tower rings at specific times, including 9 in the morning. So our hero confirms that time is measured the same way as on Earth. Then the girl informs him that the interview part is complete and that now he only needs to do the registration, while Rio asks what she means by that. Nina then points to the crystal ball she brought and asks our hero to place his hand over it. Our boy then places his hand over the ball and a voice says that he has been registered. Smiling, Nina tells him he can remove his hand from the crystal ball and thanks him. Shortly after, she hands the boy his guild ID card and informs him that if it gets damaged or destroyed, it costs 1 gold coin to replace it. While thanking her, our hero reads the card and wonders if he can collect points with it. A few minutes later, Abel's adventurer party enters the guild master's office, all of them smiling. The warrior then thanks Hugh for letting them use the lounge to talk and says they're heading out. Lynn then says they'll have a party at 6 in the evening at the Golden Wave to celebrate Abel's safe return, and she hopes to see Nina and Hugh there. Abel then turns to our hero and says he has no choice but to go, since he's the guest of honor. Rio, still confused, turns and looks at the group. The warrior explains that the Golden Wave is an inn where they usually stay, and that he'll book a room for Rio as well so he can drink as much as he wants. Then Abel finishes by saying that Rio doesn't have a choice and can't say no to the invitation. A voice says the registration process is complete and asks if our hero has any questions. The warrior, excited, says he'll answer any question Rio might have and tells them to head out. The priestess says she'll go to the inn to start getting things ready, while Abel tells Hugh that he's stealing Rio from him. Our hero then turns and thanks Nina and the guild master for all their help. And Nina says that our boy is now officially a loon adventurer and informs him that she'll return to the reception desk while he thanks her. As soon as everyone leaves, the guild master kneels and shouts that he's so happy he could cry. Then he comments to himself how gloomy things got when they found out a bull was missing and gives thanks that he came back alive. He still can't believe the warrior ended up past the evil mountains because of a shipwreck and thinks that would have been terrible for them. He then decides that the warrior will no longer need to investigate the smuggling ring and that from now on, he won't send him on any jobs involving water or the sea. He mentally thanks Rio again for bringing Abel back alive as he doesn't know what he would have done if he had returned. Next, he approaches a cabinet full of books and thinks he should inform someone that the warrior is safe. Then he walks over to the shelf and picks up a device that looks like a telephone. Meanwhile, Rio and Abel walk through the streets of Loon and the warrior says he'll give the promised reward for saving him and will buy clothes and a staff for him. He explains to our hero that he's probably attached to his leather clothes and sandals, but he'll make sure to get something that doesn't stray too far from the style he's used to. Our hero replies that Abel doesn't need to walk on eggshells because he knows it's not appropriate to walk through the city wearing only a leather loincloth. He adds that he's not attached to those clothes since he wore whatever he could find in the forest, so he'll be happy to wear whatever the warrior gives him. The warrior then breathes a sigh of relief upon hearing that and informs Rio that he can pick out some casual clothes and a few more elegant ones. As they keep walking, our hero asks Abel why he would need a staff. While they're picking out clothes, he wonders if, even as a mage, he really doesn't need one. From inside the fitting room, Rio explains that he doesn't. He's able to use magic without a staff. Abel mentions he's heard that staffs increase magical power and wonders what Rio's abilities would be like if he used one. Still getting dressed, our hero comments that he's never used one, and if needed, he has his sword for close combat. Surprised, the warrior asks if he actually knows how to use a sword or if he's just talking about the knife he carries, not a real sword. Rio wonders if he hasn't already talked about this with Abel. Then he remembers the conversation where he mentioned that being a wind mage, he would charge in to attack enemies, something he wouldn't say if he didn't use a sword. As they leave the shop, the warrior asks again if he really doesn't want a staff, and the boy replies that he doesn't need one. Rio adds that he wouldn't even know how to use it, and besides, he already has his sword. Abel agrees but points out that technically he doesn't actually have a proper sword. Our hero looks confused, shows his sword, and insists that yes, this is his sword. The warrior then asks if he really calls that a sword since he's always assumed it was just a dagger. Rio says that's not the real issue. The problem is that he doesn't even know the basics about the world. The warrior wonders why he says that, and our hero admits he doesn't know basic things like units of measurement or the length of a day. Abel comments that he always thought Rio was strange, but he didn't realize he had absolutely no common knowledge about everyday life. Our hero says the phrase, knowing you know nothing, explaining that admitting ignorance is a sign of wisdom, and in Rio's case, he truly knows nothing. The warrior spends some time explaining the basics of the world and tells him he doesn't have to memorize everything at once, but our hero manages to remember it all. Abel then wonders if, on top of everything else, the kid might be a genius. He suggests they leave that thought behind as they've just arrived at the famous Golden Wave Tavern and warns Rio to get ready to drink. As the sun rises in Loon, our hero wakes up the morning after the previous night's drinking. He thinks he's hungover because his head is pounding. He assumes Abel carried him to the room last night. That, along with the hangover, explains the state he was in the night before. And then scenes at the tavern show people with mugs in hand celebrating Abel's triumphant return. Rio and Abel drink and laugh, talking about how delicious the drink is and how perfectly it hit. As he descended the stairs, he remembered an old poem he once heard about tall grass surviving through the dreams of great warriors. He then sits in the tavern's common room and lowers his head, still feeling hungover. A lady walks by, greets our hero with a good morning, and tells him breakfast will be served soon and that he can sit wherever he likes. Rio thanks the lady and walks toward her, intending to ask another question. He then asks about the bill from the previous night, since he's moving into the guild's lodging, and the woman tells him not to worry. Abel already paid for everything. Surprised, Rio thinks about how kind the warrior is. After all, anyone who pays for others is already better than most. Not long after, he heads to the Adventurers Guild headquarters and tells Nina he'd like to follow up on yesterday's offer. She greets him good morning and asks how she can help, as he says he wants to know more about the guild's lodging. Nina explains that there are currently 30 people staying there, though some are in the dungeon and not everyone goes every day, so they'll still see people around. She adds that each room houses 6 people, and the common area is open to all. Since there's no one else in line, she offers to give him a tour. As they walk, she comments that she hopes he enjoyed the party, mentioning that everyone left happy, though Rio feels he drank too much. Nina recommends he stop by the guild shop for a detox potion to cure his hangover, and he admits he didn't know potions could do that. He then takes the opportunity to ask about the lodging rules, and Nina explains he can come and go as he pleases, with access to rooms, shared bathrooms, and a hall with a kitchen. She adds that there are no caretakers among the residents, and that everyone is responsible for themselves. Impressed, Rio asks if there were ever caretakers, and Nina replies that yes, there were, but that's a long story. The only service outsourced now is cleaning. She then says that a former adventurer runs a cleaning business in the city, and Rio comments that this is what adventurers do when they retire. Next, Nina informs him that he'll be sharing room 10 with Nils and Ito, who aren't there at the moment because they went to the dungeon together. Upon arriving at room 10, Nina shows the door where the nameplates are hung and says she'll put his up now as it's already ready. A bit shy, Rio agrees, and the receptionist hangs his nameplate next to the door. We see 3 nameplates hanging with the names of the room members and space for 2 more. A knocking sound is heard from the door downstairs. Someone gives permission to enter, and Nina looks outside and says they're both there. She leaves the room accompanied by our hero, announcing that she's the guild receptionist. With a smile in her eyes, she says that Nils and Ito are home today. Embarrassed, the shirtless boy greets Nina, and the girl says hello as well. Nina comments that the timing was perfect, as she was just about to introduce Rio to them. She asks them to take good care of him, and the boy takes the chance to introduce himself. The girl doesn't seem too thrilled about sharing the room with another member. The boy promptly introduces himself as Nils and points to the girl, saying she's Ito, and that both are happy to meet him. Nina says she'll return to the reception desk and reminds Rio not to be late for tomorrow's seminar, which should be easy since he'll already be sleeping there. As Nina walks away, Nils puts on a shirt while Ito watches him with a serious look. Now dressed, Nils comments that Miss Nina is very beautiful. Ito tells him to calm down, saying she knows everyone is in love with the receptionists, but he's definitely not in the race. Indignant, he explains that it's every man's dream to settle down with one after becoming famous, and she replies that those girls are promised to nobles, not to ordinary adventurers. Meanwhile, Ito tells him to forget about all that and says to our hero that they don't need to be formal, since they're roommates now. The girl then confesses that she was worried about who they'd end up sharing the room with, since eventually someone new would show up and she's glad it turned out to be him. Nils agrees, saying he would have hated to have someone like Dan from room 1 as a roommate. Rio, a little awkward, says that kind of thing can happen when personalities are too different. Then Nils says he's a swordsman and that Ito is a priestess, and asks about Rio since he seems like a mage. Our hero, looking at Nils, replies that he's right, he's a mage. The boy says he heard Nina talking about the seminar and asks if Rio is going to attend, and he confirms that he is and that he'll attend all 5 days. Nils then says he's only alive today thanks to that seminar. Sometime later, someone knocks on the door of room 10. Nina then appears with a new person, saying he just registered with the guild and will be staying in the dorm with them. The boy introduces himself, saying his name is Ammon. The swordsman steps forward, saying his name is Nils and that the others are Rio and Ito. Nina informs them that Ammon will also be attending the seminar the next day and tells him and our hero to go together, then says goodbye and leaves the room. Nils looks mesmerized, saying how truly beautiful Nina is. Then, looking at Ammon, Ito says he seems very young and asks if he's already an adult. The boy says it's true that he's only 16, but since his family passed away, he decided to become an adventurer to survive. The swordsman says they're all basically in the same boat and that it's really cool that he and our hero are in the same class. Rio then tells Ammon that they're going to learn a lot over the next 5 days together, while the other two say they're heading back to the dungeon and wish them good luck in the seminar. Elsewhere, we see Lin shouting at Abel, saying that something is impossible. The warrior replies that he doesn't like giving her bad news, but yes, it's possible. Lin says she knows the ice wall spell, but it's impossible to cast it in mid-air and have it fall on enemies. She insists that it's impossible for any element, since no one can create magic or magical phenomena at a distance, only around themselves. Her other two companions say that Lin is getting too worked up, and that if Abel says he saw it, then they believe him. Turning to her companion, Lin says she knows she's right because it's common sense, and accuses her of agreeing only because she's attached to Abel. Rhea agrees that even light mages can only heal those near them and that it would be extremely convenient if they could heal from a distance. Abel says he's simply recounting events as they happened and that this is how they obtained the yellow magic stone from the golem. While observing the stone, his companions ask him what he's going to do with such a huge stone. Abel says he could sell it for money, but he'd have to say who he split the profits with, and things would get complicated once he mentioned Rio's name. He continues saying that just because he registered in Loon doesn't mean his loyalty lies with the kingdom of Nightly, as people will try to win him over for their own kingdoms. Lin then says it's quite likely, considering that if even half of what Abel says about him is true, then he really is incredible. Abel gets upset upon realizing how little credibility he has with his friend. In any case, it's also possible that he might just leave Loon and end up in another city. Rhea says she understands, and if that happens, Loon would lose a vital resource, and by extension, so would the kingdom of Nightly. She continues by saying it would be terrible if he ended up in the Empire, while Abel replies that he wouldn't because the Empire doesn't suit Rio. His friend asks what he means by that, while Lin states that the Empire is the only one capable of rivaling the kingdom, and the warrior says it's because of the name. He goes on to explain that Rio doesn't think the name sounds cool, so he decided he hates the Empire, and that's why he'll never end up there. Though not understanding, his friend changes the subject and tells Abel that they only took on regular missions and those they couldn't refuse, but they didn't go into the dungeon. The warrior says he understands and truly thanks his friends. Rhea says she's very happy that he returned safely, and that they split all the rewards into 4, so he should check the amount later. Abel is surprised and tells his friends to wait because now he understands what she just said. He says it's not fair since he wasn't there and that it would be fine for them to split the rewards 3 ways, but his friends say no because that's how their group works. Abel says he just remembered that he also made money and still couldn't carry all the magic stones he collected from defeating the monsters on the way there. But then he says he got wyvern magic stones and asked the guild master to sell them, and as soon as he gets the money, he'll split his profits with them too. His friends are astonished and ask how he got wyvern magic stones. Lina asks if by any chance Abel helped another group or something like that. Abel says no, and that he already told her before. There was a wyvern nest to the south of the Evil Mountains, and they had to defeat those monsters on their way to Loon because it would have been a terrible mistake to leave them there. Still stunned and trying to understand, Lin says that what Abel is saying is that he and Rio defeated the wyverns, and he says yes. While Rio was throwing ice spears at their wings, he waited for the wyverns to fall and then struck them in the eye. While Lin is still trying to grasp the idea that our hero used ice spears on the wings, Rhea explains that wyverns use an air barrier around their bodies. And Abel confirms that yes, they do use that barrier, but they definitely defeated the wyverns using that tactic. Lin says she doesn't know how, since even Master Hilarion can't use such powerful magic, and Rhea agrees with her. Rhea then comments that she only knows one person who might match the level of magic Abel is talking about, the Inferno Mage from the Empire, but that's only legend. They say he burned 1,000 kingdom's soldiers with a single attack. They also say he defeated a wyvern with one blow and wiped out a rebel force that had barricaded themselves in a city. Smiling, Abel says he definitely wouldn't want to meet the Inferno Mage on the battlefield. Then, more seriously this time, he also says he wouldn't want to meet Rio on the battlefield. The warrior thinks about how Rio can cast magic without chanting and how he said cool-sounding names, but even Abel knew he was making them up. Besides, making up cool names matched his personality. And on top of his silent spells, he could cast them really fast. He thinks that if he had to face Rio's ice wall, he honestly doesn't know if he could break through it even with his full power impalement strike. Especially because Rio could still use his ice spears from behind the ice wall, and Abel can't think of a single thing that would let him win. All of this without mentioning what he said after they arrived in the city of Loon. He then remembers Rio striking a pose with his sword and saying he could fight someone in close quarters with it. Tired of imagining, Abel says it's not funny, and that even using magic, he still can't see himself defeating Rio. Moreover, with his close combat skills, his very existence is already an anomaly. And on top of that, there's still the Empire's anomaly, the so-called Hell Mage. Finally, Abel comes to the conclusion that making an enemy out of a mage is definitely not a good idea. On the 5th day of the Beginner Dungeons seminar, someone raises their hand and tells Rio to go ahead. Rio thanks them and asks if there's any teleportation device that lets him reach the last floor he cleared. Everyone then looks at Rio as he stands there, mouth agape. The instructor says that Rio is well informed, and yes, some dungeons do have that mechanism. He goes on to explain that the Loon dungeon doesn't have this feature, but for those that do, exploration resumes exactly where it left off. The instructor says that's what he knows, though he doesn't know the technical details, and Rio thanks him, saying it's no problem. At the end of the seminar, Amon walks ahead of Rio with a sulky look on his face. Meanwhile, Rio thinks he was right to guess that the Loon dungeon lacked that feature and that it's all good, while Amon says he's impressed. Feeling a bit awkward, our hero replies that it was just something he was curious about and that it wasn't a big deal. Suddenly, the gates make a loud noise as they open. Everyone enters what looks like a fortified room with iron bars. The instructor had already explained that every few years there's a monster breakout from the dungeon. He goes on to say that they built these bars to keep them from escaping into the city. He presents the double gates and explains that names, dates, and entry times are recorded when people go in, and if they don't return, they're considered missing. The instructor says he's already recorded all the students' names and entry times, meaning they're officially going in. Rio then notices something odd beside him. When he looks over, he sees Amon trembling and tells him to relax a bit since he's clearly nervous. Our hero moves closer and tells him to take a few deep breaths, and after doing so, Amon says he feels a bit better. Still thinking the guy looks pretty pale, Rio reassures him, saying everything will be fine because they're all in this together. They then pass through the gates and enter the dark staircase, leading to the dungeon's first floor. Amon gulps and decides to start descending the shadowy stairs into the dungeon. When they reach the dark first floor, someone comments that the place is huge. The instructor explains that only weak monsters appear there, and they can explore, but if they don't return within 2 hours, they'll be considered missing. He adds that if that happens, the missing person will be temporarily banned from entering the dungeon again. Side by side, Rio and Amon move forward with their weapons ready. Suddenly, our hero senses that something is in there with them, while Amon, panicked, asks where. Rhea responds that the target is 1 minute away, and he'll immobilize it with ice magic so Amon can strike it with his sword. He says they'll be fine as long as they stop the enemy before it attacks. Moving a little further into the dark cave, they hear a creature. In front of them appears a soldier ant, which Rio remembers seeing in the book the fake Miguel gave him. The beast then advances until it stands still in front of the heroes. Our hero says it doesn't spit acid, so the most effective method is to approach it from the side and decapitate it. Amon confirms that he understands and prepares to step to the side. Looking at Rio, Amon says he'll do his best. Our boy then begins casting his ice magic and tells Amon he's starting the attack. He stretches his hand forward and begins chanting his spell. Water bubbles start forming above the soldier ant as our boy commands the power of ice to pierce his enemy. Then countless ice spears rain down on the soldier ant's body, pinning it to the ground. At the same moment, Rio shouts for Amon to flank the creature and cut off its head. Amon confirms and starts running to the side of the creature. Using his speed, the swordsman strikes with his blade and severs the creature's head from his body. Our hero throws his arms in the air and celebrates, while Amon, still not quite understanding what just happened, stares in shock at the soldier ant he just defeated. Amon shouts to Rio, saying he did it, while Rio congratulates him, telling him he did very well. Rio approaches the ant and says they'll take its magic stone to commemorate Amon's first dungeon battle. Amon, in disbelief, asks if he's really sure about that. Rio replies that he is because they're adventurers, and that's how they earn their rewards in dungeons. The swordsman then says he'll keep that in mind and asks if it's not best for them to head back to the meeting point. Our hero says that the slugs will consume all the defeated beasts and clean up the dungeon. and he thinks that the best way to build confidence is by having a successful experience. Mugs are raised in the air as they celebrate having found and defeated a soldier ant on their first dungeon foray. Aemon, mouthful of meat, says he only landed the finishing blow thanks to Ryo, who stopped the beast so he could strike. Our hero then says the boy's swordsmanship was excellent, and that he doesn't need to be so modest. Nils chimes in, saying it doesn't matter who did what matters is that they celebrate either way. Then, after eating and drinking, Ito and Nils say their team will explore the dungeon over the next 2 days and ask what the boys plan to do. Aemon says he wants to keep exploring the dungeon and will try to find parties to go with, asking whether it's easy or not to find people willing to explore. The boy looks a bit discouraged with the idea of teaming up with random people, while Ryo silently mulls something over in his mind. Then our hero turns to Aemon and asks if he'd like to explore together up to the 3rd floor of the dungeon. Clearly excited, the boy says yes, that he'd love to form a party with Ryo to explore the dungeon. Eto admits she's curious why ants are on the 1st floor when it usually only has bats, and Nils says they've encountered ants there before. The girl remembers and says it's true that over the last 6 months, the guild has been receiving reports that ants have been spotted on floors 1 and 2. The swordsman wonders why that's happening. Nils says it happened to them a while back too, and mentions that the dungeon still hasn't been fully mapped. Someone approaches the table where our heroes are chatting. Abel appears behind the boys and says the ants are showing up because they dig tunnels that let them move up and down between floors more easily. Ryo tells the warrior it's not cool for a veteran to mess with rookies like that. The warrior responds that he was just honestly answering the newbie's question. Abel then asks if they're our hero's roommates as he introduces himself properly, saying Ryo is strong but has personality issues. Our hero responds that if Abel is trying to provoke him with that nonsense, then he accepts the challenge, while Nils wonders if he's heard the name Abel before. Then he remembers he's Abel of the Crimson Sword and stands up to introduce himself as Nils, also a swordsman, emotionally asking the warrior for a handshake. Abel says that's fine and tells the boy to do his best, but to remember that survival is the most important thing for adventurers, then shakes Nils' hand. Ryo asks what he does, while thinking how easily the warrior says wise things and shakes hands with others and wonders if that's why he's so popular. The warrior says his last job took him away for a while, so he only got back recently. Just then, Lin shouts upon seeing Abel, saying that's where he'd been hiding, while Rhea says they still need to report to the guild master. Abel, clearly annoyed, says he wasn't hiding, he was just helping the rookies with their questions. Lin then apologizes to our hero and says she's stealing Abel away from them, asking Warren to grab the warrior. Warren reaches out, but Abel quickly says he's got 2 legs and can walk on his own. Rhea apologizes again and says they still have matters to handle at the guild, and Rio says it's fine, while in the background, Warren grabs Abel and drags him off. Being carried and dragged by Warren, Abel shouts to Rio that he's a traitor, while also yelling at Warren to stop ignoring him and put him down. Everyone at the table stared wide-eyed at the scene that just unfolded, while our hero watched with a smile on his face. Eamon then remarks that it was an excellent performance. Nils, with a bright sparkle in his eyes, shouts how incredible Abel is in his view. In Loon's dungeon, we see the double security bars on the 1st floor. Next, we descend to the 2nd floor, seeing torches along the walls. Rio tells his ice to pierce his enemies. Then ice spears emerge beneath the beast's feet in front of him, pinning them to the ground. Eamon then prepares his sword attack against the paralyzed beasts. The swordsman brings his torch closer to the bodies of the defeated beasts while Rio follows. Our hero says the swordsman did an excellent job, and the latter thanks him for the compliment. Rio then says he has an idea and that for the next battle, he would like to go one-on-one. He also says that an uninjured opponent provides a greater challenge, and that he will only injure the wolf's front legs, to which Aemon agrees. Then the swordsman asks our hero if he is absolutely sure about that, while Rio asks why. Eamon says he is grateful for the training and the company of our hero, but asks if that's enough for Rio, who tells him not to worry about it. He also comments that the boy's fighting style resembles Abel's and asks if he learned from someone in his old village. Eamon is surprised to be compared to the warrior and says yes, he learned from a former adventurer in his old village. He says he used to call the man Grandpa Kiro, and that he studied in a famous martial arts school and worked very hard on his farm. He then apologizes, saying that's all he can remember. Rio says you grow much stronger when the fundamentals are deeply rooted in your bones and adds that's how Abel is. They then begin moving again through the 2nd floor of the dungeon. As they proceed, the swordsman asks how our hero knows so much about martial arts despite being a mage. Remembering his training with the Dullahan, he says he had a teacher who taught him, even though he had his own style, so he doesn't know that much about the subject. Eamon then says it's amazing that he can be both a swordsman and a mage. But then he notices that Rio doesn't always carry a sword with him, so Rio draws his sword and shows it to the swordsman. The swordsman is surprised when he sees our hero's sword glowing faintly in the dungeon. He then asks what it is, and our hero says his master gave it to him, and that it's a sword specifically made for water magic users. Upon seeing the sword, Oman notes that it's made of ice and says that of course, without being a water mage, one wouldn't be able to wield an ice sword. He adds that he's never seen anything like it before, as Rio notices two smaller wolves approaching. The swordsman then prepares for battle again. The smaller wolves detect them and charge toward the boys. Rio says he'll injure one of the wolves' hind legs and that after that, the swordsman can strike. Then he casts a water jet and two small ice spears toward the wolves. One of the wolves is hit by the water jet, while the other is struck in the hind legs by the small ice spears. The wolves then leap away, recovering from the attack, while one of them, bleeding from the legs and panting heavily, stares at Ammon. The swordsman stares back at the smaller wolf and begins to approach the target in a fighting stance. Rio watches intently as the wolf and swordsman face each other. He notes that Ammon's fighting style doesn't leave openings for the enemy to strike, but he gets concerned about the boy's stamina. He also thinks that stamina is something anyone can work on and improve through training, and that it's something the swordsman can develop. And then he remembers that he himself hasn't been practicing his runs while training magic lately. He hasn't trained even once since he left his home in the Rondo forest. Then, panting heavily, Ammon says he managed to defeat the smaller wolf, and Rio, with a smile on his face, congratulates him. Our hero then surrounds the two of them with an omnidirectional ice barrier from floor to ceiling to keep them safe. He says it's not easy for beasts to break through the ice barrier he summoned, so they can rest for a bit. Ammon drops to the ground and breathes in relief, still panting from exhaustion. Rio says there's no need to rush or push too hard and tells the swordsman to drink some water. Now more rested, the boy says he's never seen an ice barrier so thin and that it's practically transparent. Then our hero explains that it's the impurities in the water and air that make ice look cloudy, like people are used to. He also says that if they could eliminate all the impurities from the water, they could make transparent ice without magic, but in this case, it was made with magic. Ammon says water magic is amazing, while Rio thinks to himself that he's doing his part to raise the status of water mages. The swordsman reveals he didn't imagine it would be so exhausting to fight moving opponents, and our hero asks if he hasn't fought beasts before. Then Ammon says he only has experience fighting monsters in groups of several humans against a single beast. Rio says now he understands the difference between fighting in a group and fighting a monster alone, that doing it solo is way more stressful. He also says that the swordsman's fighting style wears him out very quickly. He goes on to say that if he improves his fighting style, he'll get hurt a lot less, and that he just needs to train his stamina to get better. Then he says running is the best exercise to improve stamina, and that practicing strikes is good for building arm and shoulder strength. Ammon says his master taught him exercises and stances to train every day. Rio says that if he sticks to all of that with discipline, every day, it'll help him grow a lot. He then shares that he traveled with Abel for a long time, and that even though he's a prodigy, he used to wake up early and train every day. Surprised, the young swordsman is impressed that even Abel had to train daily. Ammon, looking down, then says maybe he doesn't have the talent it takes to be a swordsman. So Rio says it'll tell him what the strongest champion he knows once said when asked what talent really means. Talent is the ability to keep moving forward, that perseverance is what makes you strong, and then he asks the swordsman if he wants to keep going or give up. The swordsman, fired up, says he won't give up and that he'll keep trying. And the next day, with the morning sun rising into the sky, inside room 10, Rio is crouched beside a bed, while we see all the other beds are empty. Next, we see Ammon panting and sweating heavily. Hito and Nils watch from a distance as the swordsman continues his run outside. Then the boy asks the girl if they'll have to run now too, and she confirms that they will. Rio, who was finishing getting ready and had just reached the door, saw both of them heading outside as well. Seeing what was happening, he brightens at the scene and hums happily. Next, we see a bag being dropped heavily onto a table as someone says it should be enough. Nina says she has a good book collection and asks someone which books they're interested in buying. Our hero Rio answers that he'd like some books on alchemy. The city of Loon has two libraries, one in the north and one in the south, with the southern one being closer to the Adventurers Guild and having more beginner-friendly books. The bookstore had 3 books that interested our hero, but they didn't lend books. It only sold them. The first one Rio wants to buy is a collection of alchemy recipes, but it costs 10 gold coins and he only has 5 at the moment. He then remembers he got the magic stones from the wyverns he defeated, so he decides to go back to the guild for now. Humming happily, Rio walks through the streets and thinks that the magic stones sold for a good price and that he won't need to work for a while. Not needing to work to have money are words that have never felt so good to think about. Then Rio notices something strange and looks up at the sky. Everyone in the street stops what they're doing and looks up at an incredible solar eclipse beginning to unfold. Our hero thinks he didn't know this kind of event happened in this world. As the sun continues to be eclipsed, someone near our hero wonders aloud what's going on. Suddenly, Rio feels like something has happened, something he didn't expect. Then he stops and stands completely still in the middle of the street. Our hero wonders if he's been thrown into some kind of void or something similar, like the setting of a fantasy world. He feels as if everything around him has disappeared and wonders if he's the only person in that emptiness. He then thinks that if he makes any movement, he might alert others nearby, and he can only think of one thing to do. So Ryo exhales and moisture forms in the air around him. Next, he activates his magic and uses the moisture in the air to trigger a sort of sonar. That moisture eventually hits something, and our hero detects someone who seems human size but slightly different. Our hero decides to attack using his powerful 10-layer ice barrier. 10 massive ice barriers instantly appear in front of Ryo in quick succession. Suddenly, a voice appears in our hero's mind, wondering if he's caught a human. Our hero then thinks that whoever it is, they broke through his ice barrier and must be strong, but they're still 200 meters away. He then wonders why the voice of whoever it is sounds so close. The voice returns, impressed, saying that Ryo is an excellent specimen. The boy remains still using his sonar, waiting to see what will happen next. We are then shown the source of the mysterious voice. It belongs to what appears to be a demon woman with curved horns. The woman says the ice she encountered is formidable, praising Ryo's magic. Our hero is then able to visualize her and wonders if she is an Akuma. Suddenly, a massive wave of fire is launched toward our hero, roaring with a deafening sound. The boy wonders if he'll be able to stop such force, while the woman smiles as she attacks him with her magic. Ryo creates an ice barrier in front of him to try to protect himself from the incoming attack. After a few seconds, he wonders if the attack is over. Then the barrier in front of him shatters, shocking Ryo. As the barrier breaks, a spear of air is launched directly at his heart. The spear hits him squarely, sending our hero flying several meters from the impact. Our hero manages to recover and thinks that was a close one. The woman using this moment to approach him says that her air spear couldn't pierce the boy. Staring at Ryo, she says his cloak belongs to the Fairy King, and maybe that's why her attack failed, adding that he still defended himself well. She then says that in that case, she'll have to cut him down herself. Realizing the Akuma's intent, our hero begins to draw his sword. In an incredibly fast movement, the woman appears in front of our hero with her sword drawn, ready to land a fatal strike. Ryo barely dodges in time and has little room to react as she's already following up with a second attack. Both begin clashing swords with fierce intensity. The woman smiles as she attacks and parries blows from our hero. In the midst of their exchange, both choose the same moment to cast magic, touching and beginning to gather power. This causes an explosion and both are knocked back, stopping their flurry of attacks. She then takes the opportunity to say that our hero can cast spells incredibly fast and calls him a monster, to which our hero replies that coming from her, he'd rather not be called that. She then realizes he can understand her and says he has become very dangerous. We then see a massive explosion as the Akuma says she'll have to kill our hero. As they continue exchanging sword strikes, Ryo wonders if she wasn't already trying to kill him before. Amidst the sword fight, our hero conjures an ice spear and hurls it at the Akuma. The woman quickly defends against it as if it were nothing. While she defended, our hero used the moment to conjure countless ice spears around her. To no effect, as both stare at each other while the mist left behind by the water magic begins to clear. She then asks our hero if that's all he's got, and the boy replies, not even close. Ryo then conjures a barrage of ice spears and hurls them mercilessly at the Akuma. Next, he uses corrosive water jets against the woman, who raises a barrier to shield herself from the attacks as water falls from the sky. Using all this power and water magic, Ryo causes rain to pour down upon the Akuma, soaking the entire city. The woman stares at our hero, satisfied that she managed to defend against all of his attacks, standing in the rain he caused. Then she notices something strange about the falling rain just as our hero utters the word boil. The Akuma begins to howl in pain as the rain hitting her skin starts to boil, burning her flesh. In agony, she screams in pain as she focuses on her counterattack. A large explosion erupts around the Akuma, forcing our hero to retreat so he won't be caught in it. Then Ryo stares intently at the Akuma, starting to grow tired and pant. The woman says that, unfortunately, her time is up and that she can't remember the last time she enjoyed a fight this much, and Ryo tells her to leave, noticing that she has regenerated. She looks at him and says he enjoyed it just as much as she did, and that she has no control over the space created during the eclipse, while our hero just watches her cautiously. Then she introduces herself as Leonor Uraka Albuquerque and asks for our hero's name, to which he responds by calling her Akuma. She's surprised and says she should have annihilated him even if it costs her final breath because he knows her true form. Leonor then says she doesn't have enough time and that he can't be easily destroyed, so she bids him farewell, saying they will meet again. Our hero clearly doesn't want a reunion with the Akuma and makes that very clear to her. The woman tells him to stop saying that because with the power he has, he'll definitely run into her again or someone like her, and tells him not to die to the others. Then she says she wants to kill him and that next time they meet, she'll be much stronger. And with that, she says goodbye to our hero. Ryo, as if waking up from a dream, returns to the same spot in the city where he had been before being cast into the void. He then wonders if he's really back or not. He looks for a bench and sits down to think about what just happened. He manages to breathe a sigh of relief and thinks that somehow he survived. Then he remembers the last time he almost died in a fight when he faced the killer water that used magic nullification to attack him. But against Leonore, she dodged and destroyed his ice spears like they were nothing. Then a sudden pain in his chest catches his attention. He remembers that's where he was struck by Leonore's air spear and thinks he must have been hurt. So he thanks his master for giving him the cloak, because without it, he'd probably have a massive hole in his shoulder, even though the cloak doesn't have a scratch on it. He presses his lips to the spot where he's hurt and immediately regrets it. Remembering his battle with Leonore, he wonders if what she was using to attack him was magic, because it was ridiculously powerful and her speed was absurd. She could strike and retreat in under a second, as if she were using air magic to move faster. He recalls her mentioning that her time was running out and assumes it must have been because of the solar eclipse. Ryo also realizes that maybe that space only existed during the eclipse and that their fight didn't damage anything in the city, only the two of them. So he thinks there's a lot about what happened that he still doesn't understand, but right now, there's no time to dwell on it. He needs to buy the alchemy book and return to his room, and also do some research on akumas, even though the false Miguel didn't know anything about them. Then he remembers asking Abel about akumas, and he said he only knows about demons, not akumas. He figures Abel must be some third son of a noble, and if even he doesn't know, finding information about them in this world will be tough. Our hero gets up and decides he'll go buy the book and return to the dorm. Sometime later, as our boy returns to the dorms, upon arriving at the room, he sees no one there and wonders if they're still training. Nils, panting heavily, says that if he weren't so exhausted, he'd easily knock everyone to the ground. Then a group of 5 people says to him that there's nothing quite like the cry of a beaten dog. Ito says that's a beautiful line coming from people who ambush them. Then one of the men says she must be joking, asking if they're going to expect monsters to announce their arrival or to stop attacking when they're tired. He goes on to say they have to be ready for anything. Rio was walking nearby when he noticed something strange coming from his left. The man gets close to Nils and says he should be glad this fight isn't real. The warrior then starts cursing at the man, while Rio says that really, those who let their guard down only have themselves to blame. Ice spears shoot up from the ground toward the men's backs. The one near Nils then notices what's happening to his friends. Stepping into the scene, Rio asks if the guy wants to know what happened and explains that he made ice spears pierce his friends from behind. The guy starts trying to curse at our hero, but Rio interrupts him, saying you should never let your guard down. He then asks if he was supposed to warn him before attacking, like he told Nils to do with monsters. Next, our hero says that this is what they get for being lazy, while Nils complains that the whole situation is a pain. He also says they've been doing running training every morning and that from now on they'll do it on weekends to save their energy. Rio calls out to the guy who's been standing there like an idiot the whole time, while Nils says his name is Dan and that he's from room 4. Recognizing Dan, our hero asks what his next move will be, if he's going to run away with his tail between his legs now that his friends were caught off guard. Dan then draws his sword and says he'll never back down. He charges recklessly toward the boys. Rio steps aside and strikes Dan in the ribs with the hilt of his sword. Dan curls up in pain while our hero returns to his friends. Our hero thought he would hurt Dan a lot more if he'd hit him with his hands because of the armor, but he still caused serious damage just using the sword's hilt. Rio then says he was at death's door earlier, and maybe the adrenaline from that fight is still running through him, and asks Ito to heal his wounds. He then shows her the bruise he got from his battle with the Akuma. Ito says the injury looks bad, but at least there are no broken bones, though she can tell the blow he took was harsh. She adds that if it had been closer to his heart, he could have been taken out, then cast a healing spell on our hero. He then says that this is what barely escaping death looks like, and he's just happy to be alive, while Ito asks what he fought against. Smiling, our hero says he'll tell them some other time. Dan from room 4 is still crouched down, writhing in pain from the blow our hero gave him. Rio then thinks about how he was cornered by Leonore one moment, and now he's showing off against F-rank adventurers. The contrast is kind of ridiculous. Later, in the bathhouse, Nils thanks our hero. He goes on to say that if he hadn't shown up when he did, it would have been humiliated, and Aemon says he moved really fast, at least for a mage. Our hero says mages these days can move like that just fine, and Nils tells Rio to stop teasing Aemon like that. Everyone laughs together as they relax and enjoy a well-deserved bath. The Kingdom of Nightly is one of the cities in the central province, and Lune is the largest border city to the south of the kingdom. This is the Adventurers Guild canteen. Nil says that he, Aemon, and Ito are forming a party for the dungeon the next day and asks if Rio wants to join them, but our hero apologizes and says no. He then says there's something he wants to do in the city. Nil says that's fine. He kind of expected that answer. Rio managed to start his career as a D-rank adventurer right away, and defeating Dan from room 4 so quickly only confirmed what his roommates suspected. The power gap between them is huge, and dungeon expeditions are usually much easier when a strong adventurer is present, but that ends up causing a lot of stress for both the stronger and weaker party members. That's why the guild recommends forming parties with people of similar strength. And our hero came from outside, Usually, those just starting out as adventurers aren't considered particularly strong at the beginning. He was one of the rare exceptions. Even the guild couldn't have predicted someone like him would move into the dorms. The next day, Monday, his friends say goodbye to Rio as they head off to the dungeon. Our hero plans to practice his magic control and stamina by running around the city walls. The day before, Leonora's powerful spells had outclassed Rio's, but his spellcasting speed was better than hers. That's exactly why he wants to use his magic faster and with greater precision. He needs to keep improving his strengths and training his weaknesses until they're no longer weaknesses. Despite that, he felt she was absurdly faster than him. He remembers that Leonora crossed several dozen meters in an instant, and she probably used wind magic to do it. Rio wonders how he could do the same thing, but using his water magic. He thinks he can shoot jets of water from his feet, but he'd need a way to launch himself from his back without breaking his neck. Maybe then he could release a jet from the back of his neck too. That might work. Thinking further, you'd have to release a water jet along his entire back, and he could also freeze the ground while flying forward. So he freezes the ground in front of him and thinks that the maximum number of water jets he can use right now is 256. Then he focuses to test his theory. He releases the water jet from his back, but it doesn't have the effect he expected. He kneels on the ground and says that he lost, eventually to something or someone. He also thinks that maybe he just can't do it now, but if he manages to release 1,024 water jets, maybe he can. Meanwhile, in the dungeon, Nils tells Ito that hunting goes much faster and they have another swordsman with them, especially against goblins. Eamon then says goblins are easier to defeat than smaller wolves because they're slower. Nils suggests they take a break and recommends licking salt and drinking water, and Eamon brings up that something was said about the salt yesterday, but he doesn't remember what. While Ito performs for healing magic, Nils explains that drinking water and licking salt is a tradition from his village, supposedly something to do after sweating. Ito says she doesn't like how Amon's wounds look, while Nils sits down to rest, saying that this time was a close call. He continues by saying that goblin archers shouldn't exist on the 5th floor, and now that he knows they do, he doesn't feel comfortable going further, and Ito agrees. They'll return earlier than expected, but they manage to loot more than usual, even when splitting the spoils 3 ways. Arriving at the Adventurers Guild Hall, Nils shyly greets Nana. She asks if they wrapped up early today, and stammering, Nils says yes and starts to compliment her. Hito then steps in and explains to Nana that they came back early because of a goblin archer on the 5th floor of the dungeon, showing the magic stone in her hand. Nana confirms that the magic stone is indeed from a goblin archer as she examines it in the girl's hand. Nina says she'll inform the guildmaster and update the section record so others will know, saying she hasn't seen a report like this in years. Nils starts to say something to Nana again, but Ito interrupts once more, saying they need to sell the magic stones they collected. While the guildmaster is filling out some paperwork, someone knocks on his door and he tells them to come in. Then Nina enters and informs him that news just came in about a goblin archer on the 5th floor of the dungeon. The guild leader stops what he's doing and, shocked, asks what she said. He then says archers should only appear starting from the 10th floor, and Nina confirms the report. Our guild leader says this must be a sign and asks her which B-rank adventurer groups are currently in the city. Nina then informs him that the Crimson Swords and the White Brigade are in town, while Hugh asks if that includes Phelps and his brigade. She also says they returned 2 days ago and are still in the city, and the guild leader says she should make sure both groups are at the guild within an hour. Abel says that even the White Brigade has been called and that he's not good at dealing with them. Ria asks how he can say that considering they've known each other since childhood. Lynn says all Abel ever does is complain and that you should follow Warren's quiet example once in a while. Then the Crimson Swords group arrives at the guildmaster's door and knocks while a voice inside tells them to come in. Phelps, Heinlein, and Shenna, captain and vice captain of the White Brigade, greet Abel as he enters the room. Abel greets them back while Phelps says Abel always greets them so stiffly. The guild leader says they probably already know why they were called and thanks them for coming, adding that it concerns the arrival of goblin archers on the 5th floor. The warrior then asks the guild leader how sure he is about that, and the latter replies that he's 100% certain. He then shows the magic stone the goblin archer and says that 3 F-rank adventurers encountered goblins on the 5th floor, and one of them was an archer. Abel responds that the future looks promising if an F-rank group managed to hunt goblins even with an archer among them. The leader then explains that it was Nils' group who found the goblins and says they were lucky that he's a level-headed adventurer, one of the bright future ahead. The warrior then asks if that's the group made up of Rio's 3 roommates. Hugh says yes, Nils, Ito, and Eamon, and adds that he had no idea Abel knew them. The warrior then says he met them briefly, and that they'll definitely become good adventurers, since they understand how important it is to stay alive. Then Phelps, the leader of the White Brigade, interrupts their conversation, saying, so that's it. That goblin archers were confirmed to be on the 5th floor, and what does the guild leader want them to do about it? He then requests that the Crimson Sword and the White Brigade head into the dungeon. and check whether another Great Surge is about to happen. The Great Surge is an event where the monster population explodes and beasts that shouldn't appear on upper floors start showing up. So the guild master says he'll pay 100 gold coins now and 200 more once they return. Abel then prepares to ask a question, just for peace of mind. He asks if all they have to do is check whether another Great Surge is coming. The guild master says yes, and that if they confirm a Great Surge, they should return immediately. He says the plan is to use the double barrier to stop the monsters from reaching the city, then defend with the knights and prepare a counterattack. Next, he says he wants them to enter the dungeon tomorrow morning, and that he'll block new adventurers from entering in the meantime. He adds that the staff from the other guild branch near the dungeon entrance will stop anyone else from going down, and asks if they accept the job. Abel says that the Crimson Sword accepts and Phelps as the same for the White Brigade. Then on Tuesday, a little after 9 in the morning, someone asks if they receive additional information because of their report. That someone is Ammon speaking with Nils, and Nils says the guild put up a notice based on their report. Ammon then wonders where Rio is and remembers that he said he was going to the library. We then see the announcement posted by the guild stating that starting Tuesday, dungeon expeditions are suspended until further notice. A cloudy day in the city of Loon Tuesday, a little after 9 in the morning. Rio decides to try his luck at the Southern Library, hoping to find books about Akumas and learn more about this world, since he lives here now. Meanwhile, Emma, Ito, and Nils are standing in front of the guild's bulletin board, reading the news that dungeon adventures are suspended. Ito then says they must have gotten more information after their report. Inside the dungeon, Abel meets with Phelps, and after seeing the number of people, asks if 20 is only half the White Brigade. Phelps says yes. He left all D-rank and lower adventurers in the city and only brought C-rank and higher, and says they're ready to move at any time. Surprised, Abel looks to the side and says even the guild master is there too. The master says he mentioned yesterday that he would stay at the branch near the dungeon entrance, since he'll need to make quick decisions when they return. He then tells them to get going, while Abel asks to wait a moment. Abel says he has a bad feeling about the first floor and asks Lynn to use her wind magic to scan it. Lynn says she will and then casts her spell into the air. Sometime later, she turns and says there are more than 100 monsters on the first floor alone. Phelps shouts that the Great Surge has already begun. The guild master then yells for everyone to run to the top of the stairs and alert the knights' barracks to call for help. After everyone runs back through the doorway, a massive metal door shuts behind them, blocking the entrance to the stairs. A man says that everyone has retreated to the top of the stairs and that the entrance has been successfully sealed. He then looks to the side in fear as beastly claws bend the nearby grate. We then see countless goblins flooding the halls near the entrance. A battle scene follows where a goblin shouts loudly at our heroes. Phelps tells them to use long-range magic and arrows, and that the vanguard will protect the mages and archers from enemy spells and projectiles. Arrows fired by our heroes strike the enemies, and many fall defeated along the way. Meanwhile, at the Adventurers Guild, Nina uses her megaphone to announce that due to the Great Tide, beasts are invading the city and that long-range attacks are now authorized. Next, we see a row of archers atop the dungeon gate walls preparing their arrows, while Nina reminds them to stay hydrated. Inside the dungeon, Abel says it looks like it's just goblins and some archers, that this will be a battle of endurance, and Lynn says they'll have to defeat them to reach the bosses. The warrior then says it seems like it's only goblins this time and that they won't stop coming until they kill the general, who won't show himself easily. Soon after, a goblin mage appears and someone shouts for everyone to be careful because magical attacks are incoming. A warrior then spots the guild master and urges him to head to the dungeon's north wall. Meanwhile, at the north wall, many warriors are entering to clash head-on with the goblins. The guild master, seeing the scene, wonders if the knights have already run out of arrows. He then says to join the knights, that together, they can crush this goblin wave with ease. An earth mage begins chanting his spell and asks the earth to be his shield. A stone wall rises in front of Phelps, protecting him from the attacks. The same mage shouts that the goblins will be defeated soon and that mages will start appearing. Phelps then cuts in half one of the beasts, crossing the path of his spear. Abel, exhausted, plunges his sword into the ground in the face of so many goblins. Warren, close to the warrior, hurls goblins into the air with his massive shield. Our warrior then defeats another goblin archer, smiling faintly. He then tells everyone to hold on just a bit longer. The defeated goblin in front of Abel begins to lose its vital essence, while a noise starts building in the distance. Phelps then stops and stares at the far end of the first floor, as does Abel. Behind the fallen goblin, 3 goblins appear, each much larger than normal, and Abel looks at them with unease. With 3 goblin generals appearing and the sheer number of goblins already defeated, it can only mean one thing, that deeper in the dungeon, there is a goblin king. The existence of goblin kings has been reported before. They typically appear every few decades, command thousands of goblins, and are capable of destroying entire cities. And since they already know there are more than 10,000 goblins in this dungeon, the existence of one should have been obvious. even though none has ever been born in a dungeon before. Abel then tells Phelps that he has no idea how strong a Goblin King really is and that he wants to defeat the 3 generals before the king shows up. He says he'll take care of one while the leader of the White Brigade handles the other, and the third will be left to the rest of the groups. Then Abel jumps with a swift motion toward one of the Goblin generals. He delivers a close-range blow to the Goblin, but it doesn't seem to affect the enemy much. A mage casts a fireball between Abel and the beast, breaking the melee engagement. Abel manages to create some distance and begins thinking about his next move. The Goblin then launches a fierce attack at Abel, who dodges to the side with skill. He and Phelps then coordinate their strategy, both with the grin of warriors who love to fight. The leader of the White Brigade delivers a spinning attack at one of the Goblin generals. Seconds later, he seems to notice something different coming from the back of the first floor. Abel, noticing the same thing, shouts for everyone to get down. Then a massive white lightning bolt strikes the 3 Goblin generals from the waist up. Our 2 warriors duck and cover their ears as the lightning blasts over their heads. Right after, one of them asks if that's the Goblin King as a monstrous beast appears, also wondering if it just tried to eliminate them along with its generals. Abel thinks to himself about what that attack was, if it really was magic, and realizes that the opponent only moved his arm and didn't chant anything. He decides it's best to stay close to him. He then shouts that he and Phelps will engage the beast. As they get close to the Goblin King, our warrior is startled by the monster's attack coming toward him. He shifts his sword to the side and manages to block the Goblin King's strike. Feeling the weight of the Goblin King's blow, Abel struggles to maintain his defense while Phelps sees an opening. Phelps then strikes the beast's arm with his spear while it's attacking Abel. The monster seems to feel the blow from the White Brigade's leader and roars at both of them. Meanwhile, Abel keeps his eyes fixed on the beast. The 2 unleash a brutal barrage of strikes against the monster, fighting with great effort and determination. The beast appears to be taking heavy damage in the battle against the 2 powerful warriors. In a moment of carelessness, Abel trips on the ground and curses as he falls. Taking advantage of the opening created by Abel's stumble, the Goblin King charges at him to strike. Our warrior shouts for Phelps to duck. The White Brigade leader runs toward our warrior, calling out to him. Abel then chants his combat technique, Absolute Shadow. The Goblin King continues his ferocious advance toward our heroes. As it reaches Abel, it begins to ready a punch attack. When it gets close enough, our warrior uses his perfect piercing sword technique and hits the Goblin King squarely. While delivering the blow to the beast, he calls out to Lin to attack while he holds it in place. Lin and Warren, from a distance, see the giant beast Abel is fighting. Right after that, our warrior chants his Absolute Shadow combat technique once again. Then we see the city in the distance as the impact of Abel's technique sends wind and dust sweeping over it. Returning to the dungeon, we see a large dark mark on the ground, and Lin looks extremely shocked. The Goblin King, with a massive dark wound on its chest, drops to its knees before our great warrior. The White Brigade leader, Phelps, approaches Abel and sees the beast kneeling with a dark pool around it. Our hero is in complete disbelief at the scene before him. In the tavern, people are packed together celebrating something that Rio doesn't yet know. Everyone cheerful, mugs raised. Eamon spots his friend and tries to get his attention to join them. Our boy walks over to them and Nils immediately says he's going to eat enough for a whole week while Eamon greets him. Eamon, happy, says Rio arrived just in time for the start of the party and that he can eat and drink whatever he wants. It's all in the guild. Soon a delicious plate full of food is placed in front of our hero. Nils, cheerful as always as he's late and tells him to grab a mug and a plate from the side and eat as much as he likes. Still not understanding anything, our hero finally asks what the celebration is all about. They explain that a great surge happened today and he learned about that during the seminar. It only occurs once every few years. Then Rio realizes that since they survived the great surge, everyone is celebrating the victory. In his thoughts, our hero just wants to make sure he grabs a plate before the boy keeps telling his story. After a while, Nils starts telling how amazing Abel was in the fight, that he's just as skilled with a bow as with a sword, and that he almost defeated the Goblin King on his own. Our hero wonders why he almost defeated the Goblin King alone. Then the other continues explaining that it was Lin who landed the final blow, but only because Abel was holding the beast and shouting for everyone to attack. Rio says it would have been bad if the king had been pierced by Abel, and from what it sounds like, it was a wind spell, one that's hardly ever used, that ended up taking down the Goblin King. Eto, who had been sleeping next to Nils until then, wakes up and says it was a spell called Bullet Rain, a very high-level magic that's rarely used. Nils jumps in surprise and looks at Eto, who, a second later, falls back into her food coma and sleeps again. Our hero comments that the name Bullet Rain sounds cool, and Nils agrees, saying it fires dozens of invisible blades and he's just thankful none of them hit Abel. And then a voice chimes in, saying the only reason he wasn't hit was because he dodged them with his combat arts. Abel then appears beside the boys in his heroic pose. Rio asks what combat art is, and the warrior says it's a fighting technique. Usually used by swordsmen, the technique Absolute Shadow helps them dodge magical and long-range attacks, and once again, Rio thinks the name is really cool. Abel knew our hero was going to comment on the name. Laughing, our hero says that Nils was praising Abel for his heroism in battle, while the other boy didn't know where to hide his embarrassed face. The experienced warrior says that Nils and his friends were essential, running back and forth to reload the archer's arrows, and without them, they would have lost. The boy, all proud, stands tall, trying to hold back his excitement. Abel says that in any case, they could have won more easily if Rio had been with them, and asks where he was, and our hero says he was at the library. Rio then says he's glad he didn't steal Abel's moment of victory, while Abel tells him to shut up. Lin and Ria arrive, saying they finally found Abel, that they knew he'd be with Rio because he was terribly worried about the boy. Embarrassed, Abel says it's not like that, and that he was just saying how much easier the battle would have been if our hero had been with them. Ria then says there's a message from the guild master. He'll be reporting to the Margrave tomorrow at noon, and Abel will have to go with him. Rio then teases Abel, saying that's a grand reward for his excellent performance in battle. Our warrior says it was Lin who delivered the final blow, but the girl tells him to stop trying to dodge responsibility. She says the only reason she managed to land the spell was because he pinned the goblin to the ground with his sword, saying that she turns to Rio and says there's something she wants to ask him. She then says that Abel told her he could summon extremely tall ice walls from a distance and asks if that's true. Smiling, our hero says yes and tells her he can create walls up to 40 meters high in the sky above him. Lin, eyes wide, starts to say something while Rio mentions it was hard at first and that he had to train a lot to get to that point. While she's still surprised, our hero turns to the side and tells them to stop what they're doing because it's dangerous. Then a senseless discussion among young adults breaks out as something is knocked over on the floor and they ask for a cloth to clean it up. 5 days pass since the Great Tide battle. A group of 5 hooded individuals walks past Ammon on the street, and he instantly recognizes them as the research group. Meanwhile, Nils stands in front of the mission board at the guild headquarters. Sadly, he says there's nothing on the board. Nina, standing beside him, apologizes. She says that over the past 2 days, all E and F rank missions have been taken, and the purchasing department has requested that they stop issuing those for a while. Awkwardly, Nils stammers while telling Nina that he knows it's not her fault, but the guild's purchasing department. A bit too loudly, the boy thanks Nina for the hard work she's been doing, while Ito and Ammon show up behind him, a bit embarrassed. Rio was walking nearby at the time, and they explain that they came to get missions and why there aren't any, then ask if he was looking to buy something. Our hero says he was trying to buy magic copper to practice his alchemy, but the purchasing department isn't selling. He was planning to get it on the 5th floor of the dungeon, so he's not too worried, but all the shops in town that might sell copper currently aren't. Edo asks if there really is magic copper on the 5th floor of the dungeon, and Nils asks if it's not too expensive, to which our hero replies that it is. The last time Rio saw one the size of his fist for sale, it was 500,000 florins or 50 gold coins. Ito explains that the guild doesn't get along with alchemists as they don't buy magic copper, which makes the product's price inside the city skyrocket. So Rio makes a proposal to the boys, asking if they'd accept a mission from him. He says you can find magic copper in a place near the city, at the abandoned mine near the village of Rusi, about a half-day walk from there. Then he proposes to pay 4 coins per person and 25 for each fist-sized piece of copper, but the condition is that everyone returns safe and sound. The boys promptly accept the mission, and Ammon says the conditions are great for them. Rio does the math and notes that it's still cheaper than buying it directly. He also points out that this mission isn't from the guild, so it won't help with their rank, but they say that's not a problem. Soon the 3 friends head toward the abandoned mine. Of course, our hero could have gone himself, but he wanted to help his roommates earn some money, since he already has plenty, and he doesn't want to just hand it out. While they were off collecting magic copper, he could practice his alchemy using materials he could buy in the city. At the northern bookstore, unlike the southern one, the books found there were more specialized and less general or broad in knowledge. We then see Lin walking towards something, a special engraved door that guards the restricted archives accessible only to people authorized by Margrave and B rank or higher adventurers. In those archives, there are many materials and texts that are not to be shown to the public, including high-level spells from every element and forbidden magic. After some time researching, Lin thinks that it's not listed there after all. But she had to be sure there were no spells that created ice walls from a distance. In the Central Nations, all spells used by mages and their incantations are cataloged in books, including the one she used to defeat the Goblin King. In addition to the incantations being long, high-level magic requires an experienced and seasoned mage, or the spell can consume and destroy its user. That's why those books are kept away from the general public. But even so, she still couldn't find any record of the spells Rio has been using in combat. Spells are created by reciting incantations, and the corresponding magical effects occur. Anyone with magical aptitude can cast them that way. As they grow more familiar with magic, they start progressing from basic to intermediate and advanced spells. But there is original magic, the kind that requires no incantations, and thinking about Rio, she compares it to a water element version of the explosive fire mage. A fire mage famous for using incredibly high-level magic no one had ever seen or heard of before. She can't understand how magic can be used without incantations, and original magic is even less understood. A woman then appears from the shadows behind Lin, saying it's been a while since they last met. Lin starts to turn around to see who had arrived so quietly. She quickly notices a long, thin sword hanging from the woman's waist. Then she recognizes the only B-rank member of the Wind group still in the city of Loon, Sarah. Lin smiles and greets Sarah. The girl then asks what Lin is doing in such an unexpected place. She says she was researching something but couldn't find anything, and mentions she heard Sarah was away on some missions from the capital. She confirms and says she was indeed away, but she came back yesterday. She then says goodbye, mentioning the librarian is waiting for her. Lin, frustrated, thinks she might as well head home too. From room 10 of the Adventurers Guild dorm, you can see the courtyard and training area. While Nils, Ito, and Aimon were out on their mission assigned by Rio, our hero was experimenting with new formulas until he finally managed to create his first antidote. Having made his first antidote, suddenly someone shouts near our boy, asking him to stop. Rio pauses what he's doing and looks to the side, alert, wondering what the shouting is about. We then see Dan from room 1 saying the girl clearly doesn't like it and telling the guys to leave her alone. One man is holding the young woman, saying she can serve drinks for them, and if she's good, they might keep her around while they're in the city. Rio sees the scene in the courtyard through a low window. He thinks they're knights trying to take advantage of a young woman who just became an adventurer, around Ammon's age, and he notices Dan standing nearby. The men say that if she lives there, she must be a new and broke adventurer, and that they could help her out. She could keep them company for the night. While the girl screams and refuses, Rio thinks he'd rather not have to intervene. He also thinks there are probably plenty of places in the city where they could go to get their fun. They could have just gone to one of those. Dan then yells at the men, saying the girl said no, and if they didn't stop pushing her, they were going to get beaten up. One of the knights pays attention to Dan and asks him to repeat what he just said. He lets go of the girl, who runs toward Dan and says he's going to teach the adventurers a lesson in manners. The girl runs behind Dan, who protects her, and 2 other adventurers join him. The knight draws his sword and says he's not going to kill the boy, that it's just a lesson, and that Dan should be grateful for it. Dan then faces the knight with another adventurer at his side. Tense, he waits for the moment the knight will charge at him. Suddenly, the knight flips in the air and lands face first on the ground. Dan is in shock, not understanding what just happened. The knight curses while trying to get up and tells the adventurer not to move. Then, raising himself a bit more, he says he'll teach the adventurer a lesson. And once again, he falls to the ground, this time on his back. One of the knight's friends asks Dan what he did to his friend. The boy says he didn't do anything, and that the man is just falling to the ground on his own. Shaking him with rage in his voice, the knight tries once more to get up and leap toward Dan. But again, he falls face first on the ground, unable to stay on his feet. The boy remains in shock, watching the man try to get up and beat him down, only to fall each time. The knight's friends stare, frozen, just like the adventurers, all watching without understanding what's going on. Rio watches calmly from his low window. Then Phelps, the leader of the White Brigade, appears and tells them to stop the show. Dan recognizes Phelps immediately, while the knight finally manages to stand. He then rudely asks who the long-haired man is who just showed up. Phelps says that they act like this and still dare to call themselves Knights of the Realm, that they should be ashamed of themselves. The knight, filled with anger, says that an adventurer is trying to teach them about manners when someone interrupts him, telling him to shut up. Phelps says this has nothing to do with being an adventurer. It has to do with being a knight, and that he should act like one. The knight says that no one stands against the Knights of the Realm, and that if they want, they can have the leader of the Adventurers Guild banished from the city. The leader of the White Brigade says yes, he is an adventurer, but he also happens to be a noble of the realm. He then says his name is Phelps A. Heinlein, heir of the Marcus Heinlein family. One of the knights looks at the other in fear upon hearing the name Heinlein, and the other says that the captain of the Royal Knights is named Alexis Heinlein. Phelps then confirms, yes, that's right, the current head of the Marcus Heinlein family, his father. The knight who had fallen retreats to his friends. Then Phelps yells for them to stop dragging the name of the Royal Knights through the mud and to get out of his sight. The boys who were there thank the warrior while he says it's all right, no need to thank him. That the actions of those knights made him angry, and he praises Dan for his attitude, telling him to take the girl back to her friends. Rio had still been watching from his low window as the adventurers began to leave. Then Phelps sees him at the window and asks if he's Rio, and Rio says yes, that it's a pleasure to meet the warrior. He says he's the leader of the White Brigade and that he had heard about Rio from Abel, but that it's true, Rio uses some interesting magic. Our hero, Mada, says it's fine. He doesn't have to bring it up if he doesn't want to. Phelps then says all he saw was the knight trying to charge the adventurers and falling to the ground like a fool, all thanks to Rio. Then bowing to our hero and thanking him in the name of the adventurers of Loon, Phelps begins to lean forward, but Rio tells him there's no need, that he has a history with Dan, and that Dan wouldn't have accepted Rio's help even if he offered it, so he had to do something discreet to assist. Phelps then reinforces that, just as Abel said, Rio is truly interesting, while Rio wonders what Abel has been saying about him to others. The leader of the White Brigade says that Abel mentioned our hero during the Great Tide celebration, that he kept saying how much easier it would have been if Rio had been there with them. He also said that it's hard to impress Abel enough to make him talk so much about someone, and that he knows Rio was the one who helped the warrior get to the city alive. And that losing a bow would be terrible for the entire city of Loon, and he's very grateful for Rio helping to keep him alive and bringing him back. Then a woman appears at the door and tells the leader that it's almost time for them to leave. He thanks Rio and apologizes, saying he has to go, but that he'd love to talk more another time. As he watches Phelps leave, Rio says he's tired, though a happy smile appears on his face. Our hero thinks that both the woman who came to get the leader and the leader himself are quite strong and wonders if it's really okay for the heir of an important family to be an adventurer. Sometime later, in the Grand Hall of the Adventurers Guild, someone remarks that it's rare to see him dining alone. Our hero says his 3 friends are out on a mission at the abandoned mines, and that even if he sat with Abel, he wouldn't pay for his food. And that actually, as the veteran, Abel should be the one paying for Rio instead, while Abel, flustered, says he has no intention of buying anything for rich rookie adventurers. Rio then says Abel is a cruel friend, and that he's overreacting. Our hero says it's rare to see the warrior dining alone in the middle of the Adventurers Guild, and asks him where the other members of his party are, while Abel says just because they're in a party doesn't mean they have to be together all the time. Rio chuckles and says he gets it. Then he reveals that he knows why Abel is alone at that moment. Abel tells him to go ahead and say why he's there alone. Our hero says it's because he's going to visit the red light district, and Abel calls him an idiot and clearly gets very nervous. He immediately tells Rio to never say that out loud again, because you never know who might be listening. Rio then says that walls have ears and doors have eyes. Abel replies he's never heard the part about doors having eyes and insists he wasn't planning to go to the red light district. Our hero says he knows that's a lie and that he knows Abel regularly visits a certain girl, to which Abel shouts nervously that it's not like that and tells him to shut up. The boy says that if Abel wanted anything with Lynn, people would start calling him mean nicknames. Abel then accidentally blurts out that Lynn belongs to Warren and immediately covers his mouth, realizing he let something slip that he shouldn't have. Rio then says it's a pairing of extremes, but as long as there's love, height doesn't matter. Thinking more carefully, our hero begins calculating, and if it's not her, then it must be the other girl. He asks Abel if he's planning to hit on Ria, and Abel, extremely flustered, tells him to stop talking. Rio then thinks to himself that he feels sorry for Ito, who won't even get a chance to express her feelings in the end. Our hero also finds himself thinking that since he came to Phi, he hasn't felt attraction or desire for either men or women, and that he's okay with that. Then Rio asks Abel if he's doing alright eating only 1 meal at night, and the warrior says that 2 meals would be a bit much. Our hero says that he'd only need to move around a little more, while Abel looks confused. Then Rio says he'll need to do more exercise at night before bed, and Abel asks if he's secretly working for the red light district. Ray responds no while smiling. He says he could be working to stop shady merchants and take their money to give to the poor, while Abel says that's still robbery, even if it's for the poor. Our hero then says the warrior has no sense of humor and decides to stop joking for now. Then Abel says that one of the researchers is a royal member and not all the knights in the escort are good. He knows some of them show up there at night, and he wants to catch them. Rio then says he understands, though he clearly looks like he doesn't. He asks how they'll find those knights, and Abel says it's simple. They'll walk around the city, and if they see them causing trouble, they'll beat them up. Our hero says that's a surprisingly solid plan. It's nighttime in the city of Loon, and the full moon shines high, lighting everything. At the Adventurers Guild, someone shouts, outraged, asking what madness is going on. That these people show up and demand all the food from the guild and still plan to enter the dungeon starting today, even wanting to break the protective seal. And on top of everything, they're demanding that adventurers serve as their personal guards. Then the guild master ends his speech by saying that even jokes have their limits. A deadly silence follows between the 4 members in the room. Clive Staples, president of the Central University of the Kingdom, says the king appointed Count Harold Lawrence as the leader of the investigation, and that they have a letter granting them full authority. He then shows the letter to the guildmaster, who picks it up from the table. Reading the letter, he says that it does indeed state the guild must provide all necessary support to accommodate the group, but that he can't give away all the guild's food, just as the man was about to thank him for understanding. Clives then asks if the guild master knows the meaning of the word accommodate. The guild master retorts by asking Mr. President Clive Staples if he knows the meaning of the phrase as much as possible. Then, Arthur Verisis, court mage advisor, asks both men to stop arguing and reminds them that they are all important leaders of the kingdom. He also says that he agrees with Hugh that they should request all the guild's food, and they'll figure something else out, like requesting supplies from neighboring towns. Hugh agrees and says that would help a lot if they did that. Clives then gives in and says fine, he won't bring up the food again, but he won't give up on the dungeon being unlocked for them to enter. Hugh says they don't know what's happening inside the dungeon, and opening it under these conditions could be fatal. The other man replies that the research team was created specifically to examine the dungeon. After a few seconds, the guildmaster says it's fine, but on the condition that they go at their own risk, and he'll ask them to sign documents acknowledging this. Clives is clearly annoyed by the guildmaster's requirement. Q then says that if Clives doesn't like the condition, then he won't open the dungeon. Arthur tells Clives that they don't have another option. He then suggests to the guildmaster that it's okay if they hire adventurers. They still need money to survive after all. The guildmaster agrees, saying they can accept or refuse at their own risk, but warns them not to forget. No one has any idea what goes on inside a dungeon after a great tide. They might find things never seen before, and they should proceed with caution. Meanwhile, in another part of the city of Loon, Rio tells Abel that there's something he'd like to ask him. He says he didn't find what he was looking for in the southern library and wanted to go to the northern one, but doesn't know if there are any restrictions, while Abel explains a few rules. The warrior says the adventurer entry card is black and that Rio shouldn't have trouble getting access. He just won't be allowed into the restricted section. Rio is surprised to learn there's a restricted section, while Abel asks him how lucky he feels to have started as a D rank in this city. Our hero then pauses and asks how popular Abel is in this city, since he seems to be greeting people on the street all the time. Our boy starts to notice something to his left as he says that many adventurers were at Abel's welcome back party. Abel, ignoring Rio's question, asks him what he's staring at so much. Then our hero tells Abel to be quiet as he watches something closely. Pointing at a group walking by, he tells the warrior that those 4 people didn't attend Abel's welcome party. Laughing, Rio says maybe Abel isn't as popular as he thought, while the warrior says he doesn't care about being popular. Abel explains that Loon is the only central city with a dungeon, so a lot of adventurers come from other places, and Rio says that group did look pretty suspicious. The warrior says he didn't see anything suspicious about the group. One of the group members seems to notice they're being watched and turns around. After a while, our hero says maybe they really weren't invited to the party, and Abel says they're not from around here and probably weren't. Rio breathes a sigh of relief, telling Abel that now they know his popularity isn't dropping that much in the city, while the warrior says he doesn't care about that. As they talk, they walk into an alley behind the strange group they saw earlier, and the sounds of combat break out, then go silent. Rio then says it wasn't very nice of that group to attack them just because Abel is popular, as the group now lies defeated on the ground in front of them. The warrior then says that our hero is just jealous of his popularity. Our hero replies that no matter how much people mess with him, that doesn't justify attacking them outright. While Abel kneels to search the pockets of the fallen men, Rio says he doesn't like stealing money, and Abel replies that he's looking for their ID cards. The warrior then finds something interesting and says it looks like an alchemy tool. Our hero gets excited and says he wants it, but the warrior refuses. Rio then asks why, and Abel says it's because it's evidence. According to the card, the man's name is Gaming Him, and he's a C-rank adventurer from the guild in the city of Jakalia. Abel then says that Jakalia is the capital of the Alliance and that something strange must be going on if Alliance adventurers are showing up around there. He then says they should hand the men over to the guards, while Rio jokes that every now and then Abel does something good. Abel says he always does good things, but our hero says he heard Abel had been telling everyone how much easier the Great Surge would have been if Rio had been there. Abel looks surprised and asks how he found that out. We then see Phelps leaving an inn and walking calmly through the streets. However, he is being closely followed by someone. His pursuers position themselves behind him and begin to draw their swords. One of the knights says it's time for Phelps to pay for the humiliation he made them suffer that morning, and that even if he's strong, he won't be able to handle all of them. The knights draw closer to the warrior with their swords unsheathed. Phelps still doesn't seem to notice that he's being surrounded by armed men. Then, as if sensing something, he closes his eyes. In the next moment, the knights leap at Phelps in a surprise attack, but they all suddenly freeze, not understanding what's happening. They realize their bodies won't move. One of the knights notices something in his leg, something like a needle. Then suddenly, from behind the knight, Phelps asks if he really thought he could defeat him. In shock, the knight realizes that the needle in his leg is what's stopping him from moving. Then a woman says that Lord Phelps let the knight's outrageous behavior slide, and that trash should be burned until it turns to ash. Then stretching out her arms, the 3 knights turn into pillars of fire before her. She then turns and continues walking alongside Phelps. Phelps tells Sheena the mage that she did an excellent job. Returning to the scene with the adventurers from Jakalia, one of them is still conscious. As he starts to get up, he wonders what the hell just happened and says those 2 guys were ridiculously strong. He says he can understand that the guy with the crimson sword was powerful, but wonders who the mage was, saying they never stood a chance. The other man from the Jakalia group seems to notice something near where they are. He wonders if something is burning nearby, seeing the light and smoke. Then as they get up, one of them says the whole situation turned into a complete mess, and that it'd be better to just go back to their rooms at the inn. While the rest of the group gets up slowly and in pain, what seemed to be the leader is already walking. He then turns around and tells them to hurry up and get moving. As he turns back to face forward, he comes face to face with Sheena walking right in front of him. She seems to notice him out of the corner of her eye. The man freezes, recognizing the mage from the White Brigade. As she passes, he starts trembling and whispers an apology under his breath. The mage continues walking ahead and goes on her way while he remains frozen in place. Sometime later, he screams out, asking why this city has so many monsters just walking around everywhere. So the video ends here. If you don't want to miss the next part, activate the notification bell, and see you next time on Tob's channel.